Ministry of Agriculture, looking at what people's problems are and trying to tailor solutions for them. Now, I'm not saying that all IT work in Africa is of that nature, but you have a capable population of people empowered by a very fast mobile phone network, the availability of smartphones for around $60, which is about the price of a bicycle, so out of the reach of most people, but within reach of many people. And this is transformational when you think about those wicked problems of health, social care, and education that Africa desperately needs support on. I am optimistic. We have the possibility to lead the world in what that future looks like in a way that is not just about techno-solutionism in Silicon Valley, but is about a better society for different places all across the world.
Neil Lawrence, it's been fascinating. Thank you for joining me on Hard Talk.
Thank you, Stephen.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Saroja Coelho. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba. Welcome to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, sitting in as your host today. Joining me on the crew this morning are Corey Funk, our show director, Abby Adiemi, our studio technician, Kevin Nipatebo, who's producing our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel today, and Heather Wells, who's in the newsroom with the CBC Manitoba headlines.
Good morning. Well, a serious assault has sent a man to hospital in critical condition. Winnipeg police say it happened around 10 last night near Ellis and Marjorie, near a hotel in that area. Police have taken a number of people into custody for questioning. For now, Ellis is closed between Barrie and Marjorie to both vehicles and pedestrians. So for now, you are being asked to avoid that area. Today is Indigenous Veterans Day. According to Statistics Canada, as of 2021, there were more than 1,500 Indigenous veterans in Manitoba. We're going to hear more coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba newsroom. Well, coming up today on Information Radio, how are world leaders reacting this week to the reality of a second Trump presidency? We're going to ask Colin Robertson, who's an expert in international affairs, to take us on a global tour. Meanwhile, pop star Olivia Rodrigo recently said she wouldn't date someone who wants to go to space. That inspired CBC's Blair Sanderson to ask people about their relationship red flags. But first on the show, harm reduction in the restaurant industry. We'll find out about an initiative from a local restaurant owner who's aiming to do just that. Taking a look now at the forecast today for Winnipeg, sunny and breezy this afternoon, high 9, clear tonight and windy with a low +3. Tomorrow, sunny and windy, then becoming light in the afternoon with a high of 13. For Brandon, sunny today with fog patches breaking up this morning. Breezy with a high of 12. Clear tonight, windy, low -1. Tomorrow, sunny and windy, but that wind becoming light in the afternoon with a high of 12. And for Thompson, a mix of sun and cloud, becoming cloudy around noon with a chance of flurries, then a chance of rain showers later in the afternoon, a risk of freezing rain early in the afternoon as well. It's going to be breezy, high +4, mainly cloudy tonight, then clearing overnight with a low of +4, a mix of sun and cloud tomorrow with a high of +5.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
This year, the film that won the big prize at the Cannes Film Festival was the film Honora by the director Sean Baker, about a young girl who's a sex worker who marries the son of a Russian billionaire.
It's a frog marriage, and we're getting in an old ASAP.
Sean will be here to tell you his story and what it's actually like to win the big prize. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcast.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. We begin in Amsterdam and an overnight outburst of violence fueled by tensions in the Middle East and sparked by a Europa League soccer match, where police say 5 people are hospitalized, more than 60 others detained after a night of violence targeting Israeli soccer fans. Crystal Gamansing has the latest.
Even before the match, social media posts showed groups of men running through the streets of Amsterdam fighting. After the game, hundreds of Israeli fans and pro-Palestinian protesters clashed. Exactly what happened is still unclear. There are videos showing Maccabi Tel Aviv fans taunting Arabs in the city and a Palestinian flag being torn off a building. Israelis were attacked. Political leaders in Israel told people in Amsterdam to shelter in hotels. Plans were set in motion for a military extraction, and former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett posted this message on social media.
Jews are being attacked at multiple locations with brutal force. It's a pogrom in action.
Pogrom describes a violent expelling used often in relation to when Jews were attacked and driven out of Europe before the Second World War. Early Friday, Dutch Prime Minister David Schoof issued a statement. The images and reports we are hearing are absolutely scandalous and reprehensible, he said. This is simply anti-Semitic violence against Israelis. Israel's National Security Council has issued a warning to Israelis and Jews in Amsterdam, calling on those who are out in public not to display any Israeli or Jewish symbols. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is moving quickly to build his Oval Office inner circle. He's appointed Susie Wiles as his chief of staff.
Susie likes to stay sort of in the back, let me tell you. The ice maiden, we call her the ice maiden.
That's Trump thanking Wiles during his victory speech on Tuesday night. Wiles, one of his campaign managers, and will now become the main gatekeeper of the Trump presidency. The CBC's Karen Pauls is in Washington. Karen, Trump is making history with this appointment. What can you tell us about that?
Well, for the first time in U.S. history, a woman will be a White House chief of staff. It's one of the few jobs in the federal government never to be held by a woman, and one that holds a lot of power as gatekeeper to the president. Susan Wiles will manage the White House staff, organize Donald Trump's time and schedule, and be his main contact with other government departments and lawmakers. After appointing her, Trump described her as tough, smart, innovative, universally admired and respected. Some say she's the most feared and least known political operative in America. Here's some reaction from David Axelrod, former advisor to Barack Obama, and Sir Michael Singleton, a Republican strategist.
Chief of staff is very effective if the feeling around Washington is that chief of staff has the confidence of the president. And the fact that they've developed this close relationship, very important.
This signals that the second coming of a Trump presidency is going to be very different.
And that's partly because she reportedly told Trump she needs to have more control over who has access to him. John Trump is known to be influenced by the first people who talk to him, so Wiles wants to prevent unofficial advisors from swaying him.
And Karen, Wiles has a long history with the Republican Party.
She does. She's a seasoned Florida-based political strategist and lobbyist. She worked on Ronald Reagan's campaign ahead of his 1980 election. She's worked with Rick Scott, now a U.S. Senator, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. This is the third Trump campaign she's worked on.
CBC's Karen Pauls in Washington. Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome.
The federal government's newly revived Committee on Canada-U.S. Relations is holding its first meeting today as they prepare for Donald Trump's presidential comeback and his administration's approach to cross-border trade. One thorny issue, the digital services tax, a 3% tax on foreign tech giants that generate revenue from Canadian users. Let's bring in Janice McGregor from our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, why has this been such a problem for the Canada-U.S. relationship?
John, for progressives in Canada, asking big global tech firms to pay tax on the millions, even billions of dollars in revenue they make off social media or search engine advertising, streaming services, cloud storage, well, that only seems fair. These are services that don't recognize borders, and they've become a bigger and bigger share of the economy. But for American politicians, these corporations are their titans. And from Elon Musk on down, tech executives are expected to have a big voice in the second Trump administration. And they argue that this 3% digital services tax that Canada implemented last summer unfairly shakes down American success. International trade lawyer Mark Warner thinks Canada should brace for retaliation here.
Because it looks like, wait a sec, the only companies they're hitting are big American companies. Wait a sec, you're our best friend and you're going after our big companies? What is this?
Talks at the OECD to tackle tackle this multilaterally and agree across jurisdictions on how to do this have so far failed to land, in part because the U.S. Congress is divided on taxing big tech. And with even more congressional races tilting Republican this week, the prospects for a global deal on this seem less likely than ever.
So, Janice, how could all of this factor into the new NAFTA review in 2026?
Well, in earlier talks, Canada fought to get an exemption that allows it to subsidize and protect its cultural industries, something that's really politically sensitive, especially in Quebec. Elizabeth Trujillo from the University of Houston's Law Center told me that the rules for regulating and taxing digital services are emerging as a critical issue.
Canada may have some safe harbor under their cultural exception, which is arguable whether it's truly a cultural exception or not. But for sure, it'll be an issue for negotiation, I think.
Rather than retaliate against the Trudeau government's DST right away, the Biden administration filed a complaint triggering a NAFTA dispute process. We'll see if the incoming Trump administration is going to be patient enough to let that play out.
CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
It may be hard to believe, but for the first time in more than 3 years, Canadian rent prices fell on a yearly basis in October. But a national report from rentals.ca and real estate data from the firm Urbanation show prices only dropped in major cities. And one tenant advocate says there's still a long way to go. Jenna Bencherchit reports.
More apartment buildings are going up across Canada, and that means rents are coming down. In fact, average asking rents fell 1.2% for the first time since the pandemic, and the trend is mostly playing out in big cities like Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and Calgary. Demand is down due to fewer international students, and developers are also finishing a whole lot of construction. Steve Pomeroy researches housing at McMaster University.
What we're now seeing is the beginning of those units coming onto the market, so that is helping to meet the demand.
Pomeroy also thinks landlords are dropping rents in cities like Toronto because prices have hit a ceiling.
They've already gone up to what the market can currently bear. There isn't much else to go.
But Toronto tenant advocate Jordy Dent sees it differently.
When rents hit a ceiling, you just stuff another renter in there to pay the rent.
And, big picture, the annual cost of rent in Canada is still only $50 less per month than the $2,200 record high set in June.
Things have to come down a lot more just to return to some semblance of affordability.
It's a different story in smaller markets, where rental prices are still rising as more Canadians move for cheaper housing. Jenna Bencherchit, CBC News, Toronto.
And finally,
Jolene, I'm wanting you, don't come for my man. Jolene.
Beyonce's crossover album, Cowboy Carter, has certainly enjoyed massive success this year. But the big question now is, will it get recognition as a country album by the music industry's highest honor? You'll find out this morning when the Grammy Awards nominations are announced. And it's not just Queen Bee.
I got a sight in my rifle, my mama's new boyfriend rebinds Bibles. Ricky down the road, he resows Red Wings. Hell, I got a guy for every damn thing.
Post Malone's F1 Trillion could also be nominated for a country album this year. Neither he nor Beyonce have previously been associated with the genre at the awards. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, sitting in as your host today. Here's what's coming up on the show. Leaders around the world are already preparing for a new political administration in the United States under President-elect Donald Trump. We'll speak with an expert in international affairs. Bad table manners, riding a scooter, and disliking pets. Those are just some of the dating red flags uncovered by CBC's Blair Sanderson. We'll find out why he's asking people such a personal question. And what if you could go out for dinner and give back to your community at the same time? A local restaurant is offering customers that experience. Stay tuned for more. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Degrees and clear right now at the Forks. It's 11 minutes after 6 o'clock, and Heather Wells is standing by with the CBC Manitoba news headlines.
Good morning. Well, a serious assault has sent a man to hospital in critical condition. Winnipeg police say it happened around 10 last night near a hotel at Ellis and Marjorie. Police have taken a number of people into custody for questioning. And for now, Ellis is closed between Barrie and Marjorie. That's to both vehicles and pedestrians. So we'll keep you up to date on that. We'll bring you the latest. Also, the head of the union for Winnipeg firefighters says the city only has itself to blame for a big budget overrun this year. City staff forecast the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service will overspend its budget this year by $16.4 million. The president of the Firefighters Union says call volumes are still rising, and yet the city's done nothing to change staffing levels. So we'll bring you that story as well in our next local news at 6:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba newsroom. Abby Adeyemi is at the controls this morning, and he joins us now with a look at the weather. Happy Friday, Abby.
Happy Friday to you, my good
Yay.
friend. And bringing you some sunshine in the forecast today. Light breezy conditions will come with that, with temperatures ranging from chilly starts in the northern part of the province to milder conditions down south. Winnipeg right now, we are at 2 degrees. It's clear outside, but I see plenty of sunshine in the forecast today with light breeze picking up sometime this afternoon. We do warm up to a high of 9, and then tonight the clear condition will stay with us, though the breezy feel is still going to be felt. Temperatures will be dropping to around 3. Up north, we're seeing a light snow at this time. That should be tapering off. Then we'll see a mix of sun and clouds. 7 around Churchill and Thompson at this point, and down south we're seeing a -5 and -6 in the southern regions. Dauphin, Gimli, Steinbach hovering close to -4 at this time. Winnipeg 3 degrees, we're heading to a high of 9. Plenty of sunshine, light winds, and temperatures ranging 9 to 12 in most areas today.
I can handle that.
Let's take it. It's still t-shirt weather.
Yes, I'm in a t-shirt right now. Great news. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby Adeyemi. He is our studio technician, and also with him in the control room is Kevin Nipatebo, who's producing our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel this morning. Hello to everyone who is watching. Now, Corey Funk, our show director, is here with an update on the traffic. Good morning, Corey.
Good morning. Yes, as we just heard from Heather on Ellis between Barrie and Marjorie, closed both ways right now to both cars and pedestrians, and that is expected to be closed for a while now as police investigate a serious assault in the area. So it's Ellis between Barrie and Marjorie. You want to avoid that if you can. If you have any updates on that, let me know. Also, keep in mind if you're in between Thompson and Gillam today, if you're planning to drive anywhere between there on the highways, on Highway 280, still being reported as covered and poor visibility after Split Lake as you make your way to Gillam and even past Gillam up to Sundance. So heads up there, really poor conditions in northern Manitoba, particularly between Thompson and Gillam this morning. If you see anything else going on out there, 204-788-3093.
Coming up on 6:15, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg. Also heard around the world on the CBC Listen app and on our website. And you can also check us out on YouTube on our CBC Manitoba channel. I'm Emily Brass, and I'm filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Well, with so many of us tightening our wallets lately, a Winnipeg restaurant wants to give back. It's offering a chance to eat a burger and gift one too. Kevin Rambarin is co-owner of Dreamland Diner on Portage Avenue, and his restaurant started a new initiative called Give a Smash, Get a Smash. He's here in studio right now to talk about it. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
So tell us about this, initiative. How does it work?
Yeah. So pretty recently at Dreamland Diner, we launched a relatively new menu. The restaurant's been around since February 2023, and we've reiterated our menu probably 3 times since we originally opened. But now we've really got these great smash burgers that we're really proud of. They're super well made. They're super simple, but they're an amazing menu item, and we're able to offer them at a relatively affordable price for Canadians and Winnipeggers specifically these days. And so we're really excited about that, and we wanted to get the word out, and we've realized, given that everybody's feeling the tightness of purse strings these days, as we were saying, I think that it's important that we recognize that maybe the most underserved in our community are probably feeling that the worst. And so we wanted to give back. We wanted to help give our customers the opportunity to try something, give them a reason to come on down and give themselves a taste of something new. But also, while they do that, feel like they can actually make a little bit of a difference in the community that they're a part of.
So I guess the idea is you buy a burger and then you
That's
pass
exactly
one
right.
on. You buy another one for someone else.
So essentially, yeah, we're going to tally up all the burgers, all the smash burgers that we sell starting yesterday until the end of 2024, and we're going to take all those numbers. And once we look at how many we've sold, we're going to use our own resources and our own staff and our own capabilities to put together a 1-for-1 essentially, and give back to those in need. People who are unhoused, people who are struggling, people who are part of the of maybe the more in need population right now.
That's interesting because, like, on a business level, we often think of smaller businesses, being the one we need to support and spend locally and everything. Because often small business owners don't have a big margin, to play with. What
That's
made
true.
you decide to give to the community, given that you're a small business?
It's definitely not easy out there for us to our margins are thin, as you said, they're very thin. But the way that we've figured out how the pricing works with these, we have a really great donation system with our current staff at Dreamland. They donate 10% of their tips to different community causes, different community organizations, which will help us fund things like this sometimes. But really, what we're trying to do out of a situation like this is, okay, yeah, we're not packed out the doors these days. It's tough for every restaurant out there, I think. But we would love to get more people to come on down. And I've always been of the opinion that I would rather focus on community initiatives than I would advertising. And typically speaking, if I can take the money that I would rather spend on, say, like a billboard advertisement or a placement in a newspaper or something like that, I'd much rather take that money and energy and put it towards something that's more community driven, and then just drum up some attention about it so that people feel the need to connect and share over it, but mostly so that that money tangibly ends up in making a difference in someone's life. Rather than just a bank account of a large advertising company. So that's sort of the way that I view the way that we try to do things as a small business. Restaurants, if you look at a small town, you look at a smaller community, restaurants are sort of a community hub in those places. If you go to a really small town where there might be 1 or 2 restaurants to the whole community, that place often becomes a gathering ground for people to show up and make memories and celebrate milestones. And communities gather. When communities gather, sometimes they don't always get along, but that's like the place. A restaurant becomes a community gathering point. And I think when you get into a metropolitan city like Winnipeg, you get into a bigger city, it's really easy to forget that that's the case, because there are so many restaurants that feel less and less like community hubs as, different. There's lots of large corporate restaurants, lots of large chains that we all feel the need to compete against and work alongside as well. But I think as a small business, as an independently owned restaurant, we have a different opportunity than maybe, say, some of these larger institutions to be able to say, hey, we are a part of the community. Yeah, I can't guarantee that everybody's always going to celebrate every milestone at our restaurant, but I want them to feel like they're connecting to other Winnipeggers when they're there, maybe not even ones they know.
So what have you seen in the community that, maybe inspired you to want to do this initiative of, sponsoring all these burgers?
Yeah, I think there's a lot there's a lot of different forms of charity and different forms of giving back that I think all have various, levels of efficacy and how much you can feel like you're really making a difference. And I think for my brother and I, Ravi and I own St. James Burger and Chip Co. as well, which is a very community focused restaurant. And then he, myself, and my partner Kara also own Dreamland Diner. And at Dreamland, I think we've just noticed that we're able to offer maybe a more affordable price point for people and a more accessible way of giving back, but it's actually like not that easy to give to go out of your way to collectively put together as a small restaurant to put together. Essentially, it's like doing large catering when we want to do these large donations and take them out to different communities and bring them out places. And it's not the first time we've done something like this, but being able to really put it back into the hands of the consumer and say, hey, we're going to match you 1 for 1. So when you eat something, I'm not asking you to spend any more money to give anything else. I just want you to spend your money with us and I'll give back for you. Because I recognize that people don't have, it's hard to ask someone to donate these days. It's not easy. So I'm trying to make it easier for somebody to feel like they're giving back at the same time as this. I really think that the needs I see in the community have only grown since I first started in the restaurant industry. I started about 4 years ago. And, it's no secret that there's always a larger growing quotient of people in the city that are struggling. And I hope to be able to try to do what it's hard to work in the restaurant industry and feel like you're really making an impact in those folks' lives. I know my staff feel impacted when I make decisions, but I really want the rest of the city to be able to feel something for the fact that we are able to do this.
Well, and there's been stories about a rise in crime in some neighborhoods, and even your business has been affected by this.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that and how initiatives like this might help in that regard.
Yeah, my brother and I, we have these restaurants. He also has the Four Crowns Hotel, which has sort of had its own fair share of issues as well. And we just opened up the Saint on Portage Avenue. And so we've had a lot of institutions that, and Ravi's been doing this for a long time, longer than I have. But in all of our restaurants, at some point, I think when you are one of those community hubs, like I was mentioning, you cannot avoid the fact that sometimes people will also take advantage of you. They might vandalize your space. They might do those kind of things. It's just part of being an institution in a community. You don't get those choices. It's just part of doing business. And I think that my brother recently there was a case where there was theft at his restaurant at the vendor, I think, at the Four Crowns Hotel, and it was some young folks who were teenagers. They'd stolen some alcohol, and he actually put out a call on social media and got them to come into the restaurant and actually volunteer to essentially cover the cost of what that they had taken. And I don't know that every single time. It's tough to ask restaurant owners and small business owners to take the time out of our days to be a little more generous and open-hearted in situations like when we experience, criminality or we're victimized by crime. But I think the sooner you accept that that's part, whether or not you like it, that's part of operating in a community. And sometimes, it's really great to be a part of the community 99% of the time. And that 1% of the time shouldn't inform how you make your decisions on those 99% of the times. And I think that for the most part, people come in, they are really excited. They're really happy to be at Dreamland, and they're really excited to be in all of our restaurants. And I think that I want to make sure that we're able to spread that joy and that positivity and extend it to beyond just okay, your kid was really happy. They had ice cream. They're happy. I don't think that needs to be restricted to what we do in our restaurants just because one night, 4 months ago, somebody did something terrible at the restaurant. I think that people make mistakes.
Okay, so back to the burgers
Yes.
before we let you go.
Mm-hmm.
Without giving away the recipe, what can you tell us about the smashed burger that, you buy one and you're going to give another burger if
For
someone
sure.
buys one of these. Tell us about the burger and how much it costs.
Yeah, absolutely. So the smash burgers at Dreamland Diner, they come in 4 different sizes. We do a junior, which is only 2 patties. Each patty is 3 ounces, I should say. So it's a small, thin patty that we're smashing thin. We do a junior that's 2 patties. We do a classic that's 4 patties. We do a rock star that's 6 patties. And we do a dream burger that's 8. It's enormous.
Well, 8?
Yeah,
How
8
do you even
times
get that in your mouth?
3 is 24 ounces. It's over a pound of meat. It's too much. I've seen people do it. I can't. I admire them. But what the ingredients are, we take a Guns Bakery bun. Guns Bakery is a local bakery. They're great. They're fantastic. We take their tropical sweet bun. We cut it in half. We are putting garlic butter on it, and we are grilling it up on the grill. Once that's all grilled, we take it. We add we take some all beef patties, put them on the grill. We smash them thin so they're like nice and crispy. It's American style. I know that Canadians and Winnipeggers specifically, I should say, love their Fat Boy burgers, which I sell a lot of over at St. James Burger. But here, I want to offer something a little different. So thin smashed patties, American cheese slice on top so it's nice and creamy, crispy onions that we make in-house every day, which is like battered, fresh-cut onions with spices and things like that. And then we also just top it all off with a secret sauce that I obviously cannot give you the recipe
No,
for.
that is a secret for a good reason. And we appreciate you sharing as much as you have, Kevin.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming in this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And I'm already hungry for a burger at 6:25 in the
know.
morning. That was Kevin Rambarin, co-owner of Dreamland Diner on Portage Avenue. He has what he calls a harm reduction approach to running a restaurant. And if you want to take part in Get a Smash, Give a Smash, you can head on down to the restaurant. It's at 2615 Portage Avenue, and you have until the end of the year to take part.
At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, Canadians pause to reflect and remember, honoring those who have served and remembering those we have lost. On Monday, live from the National War Memorial in Ottawa, join CBC News for special coverage of the Remembrance Day ceremony on radio, TV, CBC News Network, and on CBC Gem, CBC Explore, and local streaming channels.
26 minutes after 6 o'clock, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Well, you expect to see dogs at a dog daycare, but at a Regina facility, one of the dogs you'll find there is not a client. CBC's Joelle Seal went out to Fella and Fetch to meet Lily, the dog boss.
Hi, my name is Miranda Michael, and I'm the manager and managing partner at Fell and Fetch. This is Lily. She's our meter and greeter at the facility. Can you sit? Yes. Can you lay down? Good girl. Can you roll over? Thank you. Can you shake a paw? Lily, sit. We kind of joke around and say she works here. So when our new clients come in, we always do assessments with our new pups. Lily will always be the first to greet them. She's just got a nice calm demeanor. So if they're feeling a little anxious or uneasy, she'll usually just kind of help them settle in and start the process with them. We have dog daycare, which is a big hit. Boarding, we have grooming 7 days a week. We have training and retail. Daycare is a great place to let them come, burn off their steam while we're busy at work. They get out lots. We have tons of outdoor space, so they're outside a lot here. Lily was actually a rescue, and they didn't have a foster family for her at the time. She had been returned quite a few times. So one of the fosters that we work with reached out and asked if we would just house her for a little while until they found a family, and we fell in love with her and saw lots of potential. She just needed some training, so we took her under wing and she became mine. Honestly, it was in the first few days of having her. She had so much confidence with the other dogs. Obviously, we had a soft spot. We were feeling a little bit sorry for her that she had been returned so many times, but to see her confidence with the other dogs and that spunk in the back, we knew we had to keep her. We're not sure what breed Lily is. She looks like a little bit of a cross between maybe American Eskimo, some Shepherd, maybe some Collie in there. She feels like she's kind of got a job here to do now, so she likes to be up front. This is her jam up here. But every once in a while, she'll pick her favorites. She's been around for a while. This is her 5th year here. So when she sees one of her favorites walk in the door, she'll usually follow them to the back, have a good play, and then get back up here and get to work.
Oh my goodness. Oh, do you go to all the stores, Festival?
Lily, who's here? Who's here?
Hi.
Who's that?
Hi.
Get him.
Hi.
Get him, Lily. Get him, Lily. We've put a lot of time into her, and yeah, it was a long process. It took about a year for us to really have full confidence in her, but After that, she's been great. So a lot of her issues were with resource guarding, so possessions, because she was found up north on her own. So we would have to hand feed her. We'd have to show her that anything that was valuable to her, we were in control of that until we had the trust in her to be able to put it down, share it with other dogs, with us. Mostly food aggression, but sometimes valuable possessions too. I love having her here. She is living the best life now. Yeah, this girl's got it made.
That was Miranda Michael and Lily from Fella and Fetch in Regina. The news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, we are looking forward to another sunny, breezy day and still a lot warmer than seasonal. Today's high is 9. Well, a serious assault has sent a man to hospital in critical condition and shut down part of a busy St. James Street. CBC's Megan Ketchison is live on Ellis right now. Megan?
So this is at Ellis and Barrie, and we have a police car and flares that are blocking Ellis at Barrie, not only to cars but also to pedestrians. And we have police tape that is up around the front of the Airport Motor Inn, and this is where this serious assault is what police are describing it as occurred last night around 10 o'clock. One man was taken to hospital in critical condition. The IDENT unit is on the scene. There are a number of people that have been taken in for questioning. There's word that there was a weapon that was involved, but police are not saying what kind of a weapon was used or whether the suspect in the serious assault is actually amongst those that are being questioned. Again, the IDENT unit is here. This is a busy intersection out near the airport. So Barrie at Ellis is closed all the way to Marjorie. So keep that in mind if this is a part of your route. Reporting live, Megan Ketchison, CBC News.
Thank you so much, Megan. We'll bring you the latest on that developing story through the morning. The head of the union for Winnipeg firefighters says the city has only itself to blame for a big budget overrun this year. City staff forecast the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service will overspend its budget this year by $16.4 million. Overtime alone accounts for more than $7 million of that. Tom Billis at the United Firefighters of Winnipeg says call volumes continue to rise, yet the city, he says, has done nothing to change its staffing levels.
People are working overtime, but you need time to recuperate. You cannot and should not always be working on your time off. So what happens is our members get burnt out and then they start to just outright decline over time.
Mayor Scott Gillingham says more revenue is needed to keep up with Winnipeg's population growth and spikes in homelessness and addiction. He says the city is in talks with the province about finding that extra funding. The newly elected chief of a remote First Nation in eastern Manitoba is being remembered for her leadership and her work with families. Chief Tanya Bittern died Saturday following a medical issue just 4 days after she was elected. She was set to officially become chief of Poplar River First Nation on November 4th. Bittern previously served as a counselor. She also worked as director of the Head Start program, which helps parents and their children. Vera Mitchell recently served as chief and became a mentor for Bittern.
She's very community-oriented and a very good people's person. Like, she had patience, and she was honest and always looked out for everybody, and especially because she had children. Her children were going to grow up like she did in this community.
A counselor in the community is now serving as acting chief until next steps are decided. In Amsterdam, police say 5 people are in hospital and more than 60 are in custody after a night of violence involving Israeli soccer fans. The fans were in the Dutch capital for a Europa League soccer match. You can hear more on that coming up on World Report at 7. Today is Indigenous Veterans Day. Every year in November, Saging Anishinaabe High School holds services and hangs banners to honor its community's veterans. Since the pandemic, the school has created a video as another way to mark the veterans' sacrifices. The video is posted online, showcasing Saging veterans' names, photos, and where they served. Gary Swampy, the school's principal, says sharing the video has had an unexpected outcome.
It started off with COVID. That's how it started with that video, but it grew, and now there's some that have been taken away when they're young in the 60 scope, and now they're coming forward after seeing this video. Even if they were taken away, they were born here, they were from here, it brings them home.
This year, more than 50 veterans featured in the school's Remembrance Tribute video, and the school is holding a celebration for Indigenous Veterans Day today. Make it 13 wins in 14 starts for the Winnipeg Jets. Gabe Velarde at the very start of the first period on TSN with the only goal of the game. The Winnipeg Jets hold back the Avalanche 1-0. The Avs, of course, the team who knocked Winnipeg out in the first round of last season's playoffs. But Gabe Velarde didn't see this as a game of revenge. In fact, he doesn't think the Jets played well and says one person alone gets credit for the win.
It wasn't our best game. I mean, how Bucky won that game for us. It's that simple. I think we had a good first period, and then after that, it just kind of, we kind of lost it somewhere.
With 35 saves, Connor Hellebuck recording his 40th career shutout for Winnipeg. The Jets are back in action for a matinee tomorrow, hosting Dallas. Game time, 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Not a feeling of revenge. Do you buy that, Heather? Was there just
Do you know
little
everybody
revenge?
was asked that in the post-game interviews, and they all said no, didn't even think of it.
Wow. Okay.
I think they probably did.
They were probably like, okay, we'll just say it's not revenge. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba newsroom. It's 6:36. Time for an update on the forecast with Abby Adeyemi. Hi, Abby.
Hi, Heather. Did I say Heather?
It's okay.
Hi,
It's
Emily.
Friday, Abby. We're all tired.
Yeah, shaping to be a sunny day with light breezy conditions in most of the regions. Currently 2 degrees in Winnipeg. It's clear outside. Plenty of sunshine to come today. There's going to be some breezy conditions developing as we get into the day. We do warm up to a high of 9 today, though it's feeling like -7 as you step out this morning, so you will feel that chill. Brandon, -6. Mainly clear conditions now. Sunny conditions will come your way. We noticed some foggy conditions this morning. That should be lifting as you get into the morning. Light breeze will develop by noon. You warm up to a high of 12. And the clear skies continues into the overnight period. Moving north to Thompson, -7 and clear at this time. Expect a mix of sun and clouds. There's a slight chance of light snow possible. You might get a freezing rain this afternoon. You get a high of 4 today, though it's going to be feeling like -10 for folks in Thompson this morning. Further north in Churchill, -8. You're seeing light snow in that region. The light snow should taper off sometime this morning, followed by a mix of sun and clouds. Then you see some breezy conditions this afternoon with a high. You only warm up to about -2, though it's going to feel like -20 with the wind chill factored in for folks in Churchill today. And then for tonight, the light snow will change to freezing rain. It's going to make its reappearance. Dauphin, -5 and clear. You should see sunny conditions with fog patches also lifting this morning. Then it becomes breezy this afternoon. You do warm up to a high of 12. It is -1 in Gimli. We're seeing clear conditions. The Interlake region will see sunshine with breezy conditions. That should be easing later as you get into the afternoon. The high for today, 9. With the wind chill factored in, it's going to be feeling in the range of -7 this morning. So you might want to dress accordingly. Steinbach is at -4. It's clear there. Sunshine in the forecast. Breezy conditions will come with that, and then it should ease off as you get into the day. The high would only get to 9. Morris, -3 and clear. The forecast for the Pembina Valley region calls for sunshine and light breeze this afternoon. Your highs would get to 10 degrees, and then for tonight, the clear conditions will continue, though it's going to be breezy, and you'll be deep into around 3 degrees. Across board, it's just shaping to be like another sunny day. Light breezy conditions, clear skies in most of the areas with some, the same condition continuing into the evening, and we'll see temperatures getting close to 14 for down south.
A good day for a lunchtime walk.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, and those days are limited. Let's not forget.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby Adeyemi. He's our studio technician as well as our weather specialist. And with him in the control room is Kevin Nipatebo, who's producing our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. And joining me right now Now in studio is Corey Funk, our show director, with a look at the roads.
Yeah, the only kind of major issue I want to point out too is actually northern Manitoba. Still on Manitoba 511, Highway 280, which takes you from Thompson to Gillam and just past Gillam to Sundance. It is being reported as covered, and as you get closer to Gillam, just past Split Lake, also poor visibility as well, still being reported. So if you happen to drive on those highways and you have an update on what you're seeing there, give me a call and let me know what you're seeing or not seeing because of the poor visibility. That's really the only major issue I want to flag. But if you do see something else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
That's Corey Funk, our show director. Well, time now for some business news. Crystalie Ramlakan joins us with the CBC Business Report. Good morning, Crystalie.
Hey, good morning, Emily.
So annual rental prices have actually gone down for the first time in more than 3 years. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's right. But the declines are mainly concentrated in bigger cities. So a new report from rentals.ca and Urban Nation found average asking rents across Canada sat at $2,152 last month, and that is down 1.2% compared to last year. So cities like Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, and Montreal saw rent decreases. But, the average rent for apartments and condos in Winnipeg is actually up 5% to just under $1,600. Now, Urban Nation says it's rare for rents to decline year over year at the national level, but key drivers of rent growth, including a strengthening economy, quickly rising population, and worsening home ownership affordability, are starting to reverse. Now, the report predicts that we may see rents continue to decline in the near term, especially as more apartments are being built. Now, BC and Ontario recorded the most significant annual rent decreases. So BC saw average asking rents for apartments go down 3.4% to $2,549, and Ontario went down by almost 6% to $2,350.
Wow. Okay. Interesting what's happening with the rents there. So meanwhile, the U.S. Federal Reserve has cut interest rates. What are the details on that, and what does it signal for Canada?
Yeah, so the Fed cut interest rates by 0.25 percentage point yesterday, and policymakers made the decision as the job market eases there and inflation continues to move toward the central bank's 2% target. So the benchmark rate now sits at 4.5% to 4.75%, that range there. And, as for what it means here at home, well, analysts believe that the move supports the Bank of Canada cutting its overnight lending rate again here in December. So here's John Zechner, who is the chairman of J. Zechner Associates.
Now, the Bank of Canada moved 50 basis points at the last meeting. They may, you may see them go that way again. I mean, their inflation here is at, or is actually under now that 2% target, and our growth, lags the U.S. by a pretty hefty margin right now. So there's more room to cut rates up here. So.
Now, President-elect Donald Trump campaigned on promises ranging from steep tariffs on imports to a crackdown on immigration, and those proposals could have a broad and unpredictable impact on the economic landscape there, which the Fed will have to navigate in the coming months as officials try to keep inflation contained.
Okay, and staying with the effects of the U.S. election, it wasn't just a good week for Trump, but also for the wealthy, I hear.
Yeah, that's right. So the wealth of the world's 10 richest people soared by a record amount, according to Bloomberg's Billionaire Index. The biggest gainer was Elon Musk, the world's richest person and one of Trump's most outspoken and dedicated supporters. So his wealth jumped $26.5 billion to $290 billion on Wednesday. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos' wealth grew $7 billion a week after defending his decision to withhold the Washington Post's endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris. And the co-founder of computer software company Oracle, Larry Ellison, another Trump supporter, saw his net worth rise $5.5 billion. Now, other gainers include Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, but they did not endorse a candidate this year, and they have spoken in favor of Democratic candidates and causes in the past. So collectively, the top 10 richest people gained $64 billion. And Bloomberg says it was the biggest daily increase of wealth since it started the index back in 2012. And the reason for this was because, the market rallied on Wednesday as the election concluded pretty swiftly. And with the expectation that Trump will usher in this new era of deregulation and other pro-business laws and policies that investors believe could benefit the stock market overall, especially billionaires who hold much of the world's wealth.
Wow. It's pretty staggering. It's going to take me a while to absorb all that, Crystalie. So what's happening in the markets so far this morning?
So in Europe, markets are lower as investors monitor interest rate cuts from both the Fed and the Bank of England. Germany is down, the UK is down, France is down. In Asia, markets are mixed. Japan is up, Shanghai and Hong Kong are both down. Oil is down $1.23 to $71.13 US per barrel. Gold is down $9.50 to $2,696.30 US per ounce. And the dollar is down almost 0.2 cents to 72 cents US.
Thanks for the update, Crystalie.
Okay, thanks, Emily.
That was Crystalie Ramlakan with the CBC Business News. It's 6:45. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg. Also heard around the globe on the CBC Listen app and on our website. You can also check us out streaming live right now on the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. I'm Emily Brass. Well, American pop star Olivia Rodrigo has raised eyebrows over a comment she made about dating. In an interview with Netflix, she revealed that during a first date, she always asked the guy if he would want to go to space. She says it's a red flag if they say yes, because people who want to go to space are, quote, full of themselves. All of that got CBC's Blair Sanderson wondering about other people's dating red flags, and he flagged down a few people on the street to find out.
Hello.
Hello.
Are you on the dating scene?
Yeah, I date around and stuff.
I have been for like a little bit.
Kinda, yes.
Do you have a good first date question or red flags that you look out for?
If I'm going on a date and say like a cafe or a restaurant and my date treats the server or like the people working there very badly, that's a red flag for sure.
Ask how much money you make or something like that. I would consider that to be kind of a personal question, and that's not the kind of person I'm really interested in,
To me, a red flag would be someone who enthusiastically would want to go bungee jumping. That's like not the vibe. To throw yourself off a building hanging on by a little string, that's red flag. Speaks to their character. Kind of like going into space. It's a little bit like, why do you need to do that? There's so many other things. Yeah, I mean, like, the electric scooters are pretty stupid too, so that's a red flag if they ride though.
What about you? Red flag.
Someone who is like more worried about material things and how other people perceive them.
How do you suss that out? How do you know if a person is too into themselves?
They'll be like, they'll talk about name brand stuff, or they'll want to go to just like name brand restaurants that everybody knows, and they don't want to try somewhere new that's quiet and that's off the beaten path.
I like to ask people what their favorite podcast is. So if they say the JRE podcast, the Joe Rogan Experience, that's my red flag.
And no idea that this person could be salvageable if they like Joe Rogan?
There are some added context. So if you're a big UFC fan and you only really listen to his UFC stuff, then that is not really a red flag for me.
So liking UFC is okay?
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. It's if you're a big fan of his stances on COVID, for example, or trans people or anything like that, that's a red flag for me.
Oh, I would say like not knowing anything about the women's cycle. Like that's a huge red flag.
Good table manners. If she doesn't have good table manners, it's a red flag for me.
Mine, it might be a bit of a hot take, but like if I'm on a dating app and they have a picture with like a dead animal, like they're like hunting deer and like fish and stuff, I'm not into that.
And how about you? Any dating red flags?
Not really. I like to be pretty open and like give people a chance and see their perspective about things. But I think it'd be awesome to go to space. So I disagree with Olivia there.
yeah, you should still be open-minded, but sometimes it's just like, it's a no. Yeah, you just know. We're not going to match, you know? Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I think we've been a match. You've been very helpful. Thank you so much.
No problem. Have a good one.
Take care.
That was CBC's Blair Sanderson talking to people about their dating red flags. And Blair says several people told him they often discover red flags through the dating app, so they don't actually have to go out and meet them in person at all. Now, here's a tune from the inspiration behind those conversations. Here's Olivia Rodrigo with Good For You.
Good for you, I guess you moved on really easily. You found a new girl and it only took a couple weeks. Remember when you said that you wanted to give me the world? And good for you, I guess that you've been working on yourself. I guess the therapist I found for you, she really helped. Now you can be a better man for your brand new girl. I guess you're getting everything you want. You bought a new car and your career's really taking off. It's like we never even happened, baby. Tell me what is up with that. And good for you, it's like you never even met me. Remember when you swore to God
That's Olivia Rodrigo with Good For You. That's quite the tune to get you moving in the morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. World leaders are preparing for the second presidency of Donald Trump after his historic election in the U.S. And many countries are offering public congratulations while keeping worries private and behind closed doors. For more, we're joined by Colin Robertson. He's a former Canadian diplomat and a fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. Good morning.
Good to be with you, Emily.
So leaders of the European Union are meeting in Budapest this week. What's the reaction there to Trump's victory?
Well, I think, initially consternation, shock on the part of many of them, but now a recognition that this is the way it's going to be, and so they're going to have to get on with the President of the United States, a relationship that matters to each and every one of them, both in terms of their economic prosperity and their national security.
Yeah. And of course, in Eastern Europe, there's concerns over Russia's war in Ukraine. What does the new Trump administration mean for that?
Well, Mr. Zelensky, I think, would not be happy with the result. The Republicans, when they were the majority in the House and may well be the majority there again, had delayed for months and months legislation that Mr. Biden had put forward to provide further arms and economic support, basically money to keep the government going in Ukraine. And the Republicans have not shifted their views. There are many that think that this is not a war that they want to be involved in, and this is one that the Europeans should carry the load on. But Zelensky, to his credit, has reached out and said, look, we need your help. We have a peace plan. Would you back it? But in the meantime, we continue to need the arms that you provide and the money that keeps us afloat.
Okay. So, what does it mean for Ukraine specifically when you think about those kind of concerns for Zelensky?
Well, he faces, Trump has said that he would settle the war in a day, and that doesn't bode well for Ukraine because currently the Russians are occupying, a fifth of their country. They've been in Crimea since 2014, and if you were to take the situation on the battlefield in any kind of a peace negotiation, it would inevitably probably involve Russia occupying for at least for now what had been Ukrainian territory.
Okay. So turning to another part of Europe, the UK, a country that's prided itself on its special relationship with the U.S. ever since the Second World War. What happens to that relationship under a Trump presidency, given the current Labour government right now in Britain?
Sure. Well, when Trump was president the last time, he was dealing with a fellow conservative and a sort of like-minded, forceful, some might say, a bullying individual in Boris Johnson. Keir Starmer is quite a different fish, a progressive. But again, as you point out, all British prime ministers recognize and think that and know that relationship, special relationship, matters. And so Keir Starmer, when he was in New York at the General Assembly in September, met with Trump at Trump Tower, and his Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, who dissed Mr. Trump in opposition, has met made nice with J.D. Vance, who will be the vice president. Again, countries have interests, and their leaders inevitably follow through, whether they're on the left side or the right side of the political spectrum. Same applies to Canada.
Okay. And so let's turn to China now. I mean, what has that country said about Trump's win, and what are you going to be watching for in the American-Chinese relationship?
Well, the last time Trump was in, he imposed major tariffs on China to try and rectify the trade imbalance, which certainly favors China. And during the campaign, the Chinese media referred to the United States as a hostile power. But Xi Jinping has met with Trump, and again, China, I think, will want to have some kind of a relationship. They'll want to try and obviously prevent the imposition of tariffs. I think that's going to be difficult. The Trump administration, which we'll start to see the appointments in the coming days, those he has worked most closely with are what we call China hawks, and they are reflective very much of the American people whose favorability view of China is lower than it was in Tiananmen Square. But that public sentiment also applies to how Canadians view China.
We're running low on time, but we have to hear about Canada. How do you expect Prime Minister Trudeau will navigate a Trump presidency?
Well, he's already begun. If you recall, in January, he asked Philippe Francois Champagne and Marion to start going down the United States, leading a team approach that includes the premiers and legislators, as they remind Americans that we're one of the biggest trading partners, and 35 American states were their biggest market, and we create employment in the states. That's important because our trading arrangement that Mr. Trump renegotiated, remember he called the NAFTA the worst deal ever, but he negotiated the Canada-U.S., or what the Americans call U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. That's up for renegotiation. It will be renegotiated, and that effort on our part has already begun, and certainly Mr. Trudeau is aware of that, and yesterday appointed a cabinet committee, and in his conversation with Mr. Trump yesterday, after congratulating him, they talked business on defense, where Trump wants us to do more. This relate particularly to NORAD and to NATO, but they also talked about trade and supply chains, for example.
And so it begins. Thank you so much. Yes, exactly. Colin Robertson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Emily.
Colin Robertson is a fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute and a former Canadian diplomat. We're coming up on National News Time, but Heather Wells is standing by with the Manitoba headlines.
Good morning. Well, a man is in critical condition at last word after a serious assault. Police were called to the Airport Motor Inn at Ellis and Barrie around 10 last night. They have taken a number of people in custody for questioning. For now, Ellis is closed between Barrie and Marjorie to both vehicles and pedestrians. You are being asked to avoid that area. We'll bring you the latest as that story develops. Today is Indigenous Veterans Day. According to Statistics Canada, as of 2021, there were more than 1,500 Indigenous veterans in Manitoba. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells. Well, taking a quick look at the forecast today, right now at the Forks in Winnipeg, it's 2 degrees and clear. It's going to be sunny today and breezy with a high of 9. Clear tonight and windy, low +3. And for tomorrow, sunny and windy, although that wind will become light in the afternoon with a high of 13. Not much to report yet on the traffic line, but we know there are orange cones out there. We know there are places where there are blockages and closures. Give us a call, 204-788-3093. Let us know what you're seeing out there on the roads. Well, still to come on the show, today is Indigenous Veterans Day. We'll hear how one veteran from Peguis First Nation had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to honor his great-uncle who died in the First World War. And as Manitobans take time today and Monday to remember the lives lost and sacrifices made during wartime, the Transcona Museum is highlighting stories of people from that community who served. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg. Stick around, lots more to come on Information Radio. World Report's up next.
Today on The Current.
The protests quickly turn violent, people hitting each other with poles and fistfights.
Protests outside a Hindu temple in Brampton, Ontario have led to violence as tensions escalate after Canada accused the Indian government of crimes against the Sikh community here. What would it take to diffuse the tensions? It's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. We begin in Amsterdam and an overnight outburst of violence fueled by tensions in the Middle East and sparked by a Europa League soccer match. Police say 5 people are in hospital, more than 60 others detained after a night of violence targeting Israeli soccer fans. Crystal Gomansing has the latest.
Even before the match, social media posts showed groups of men running through the streets of Amsterdam fighting. After the game, hundreds of Israeli fans and pro-Palestinian protesters clashed. Exactly what happened is still unclear. There are videos showing Maccabi Tel Aviv fans taunting Arabs in the city and a Palestinian flag being torn off a building. Israelis were attacked. Political leaders in Israel told people in Amsterdam to shelter in hotels. Plans were set in motion for a military extraction, and former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett posted this message on social media.
Jews are being attacked at multiple locations with brutal force. It's a pogrom in action.
Pogrom describes a violent expelling used often in relation to when Jews were attacked and driven out of Europe before the Second World War. Early Friday, Dutch Prime Minister David Schoof issued a statement.
The
images and reports we are hearing are absolutely scandalous and reprehensible, he said. This is simply anti-Semitic violence against Israelis. Israel's National Security Council has issued a warning to Israelis and Jews in Amsterdam, calling on those who are out in public not to display any Israeli or Jewish symbols. Crystal Gomansing, CBC News, London.
Russia's foreign ministry says it has summoned the deputy head of Canada's embassy in Moscow. This is in protest over what it calls false accusations that Moscow was behind a sabotage campaign against NATO countries. Western officials accused Russia of plotting to trigger explosions on cargo flights to the U.S. and Canada. Moscow denies that. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is moving quickly to build his Oval Office inner circle. He's appointed Susie Wiles as his chief of staff.
Susie likes to stay sort of in the back, let me tell you. The ice maiden. We call her the ice maiden.
That's Trump thanking Wiles during his victory speech on Tuesday night. Wiles was one of his campaign managers and will now become the main gatekeeper of the Trump presidency. The CBC's Karen Pauls is in Washington. Karen, Trump is making history with this appointment. What can you tell us about that?
Well, for the first time in U.S. history, a woman will be a White House chief of staff. It's one of the few jobs in the federal government never to be held by a woman, and one that holds a lot of power as gatekeeper to the president. Susan Wiles will manage the White House staff, organize Donald Trump's time and schedule, and be his main contact with other government departments and lawmakers. After appointing her, Trump described her as tough, smart, innovative, universally admired and respected. Some say she's the most feared and least known political operative in America. Here's some reaction from David Axelrod, former advisor to Barack Obama, and Sir Michael Singleton, a Republican strategist.
Chief of staff is very effective if the feeling around Washington is that chief of staff has the confidence of the president. And the fact that they've developed this close relationship, very important.
This signals that the second coming of a Trump presidency is going to be very different.
And that's partly because she reportedly told Trump she needs to have more control over who has access to him. John Trump is known to be influenced by the first people who talk to him, so Wiles wants to prevent unofficial advisors from swaying him.
And Karen, Wiles has a long history with the Republican Party.
She does. She's a seasoned Florida-based political strategist and lobbyist. She worked on Ronald Reagan's campaign ahead of his 1980 election. She's worked with Rick Scott, now a U.S. Senator, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. This is the third Trump campaign she's worked on.
CBC's Karen Pauls in Washington. Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome.
The federal government's newly revived Committee on Canada-U.S. Relations is holding its first meeting today as they prepare for Donald Trump's presidential comeback and his administration's approach to cross-border trade. One thorny issue, the digital services tax, a 3% tax on foreign tech giants that generate revenue from Canadian users. Let's bring in Janice McGregor from our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, why has this been such a problem in the Canada-U.S. relationship?
John, for progressives in Canada, asking big global tech firms to pay tax on the millions, even billions of dollars in revenue they make off social media or search engine advertising, streaming services, cloud storage, well, that only seems fair. These are services that don't recognize borders, and they've become a bigger and bigger share of the economy. But for American politicians, these corporations are their titans. And from Elon Musk on down, tech executives are expected to have a big voice in the second Trump administration. And they argue that this 3% digital services tax that Canada implemented last summer unfairly shakes down American success. International trade lawyer Mark Warner thinks Canada should brace for retaliation here.
Because it looks like, wait a sec, the only companies they're hitting are big American companies. Wait a sec, you're our best friend and you're going after our big companies? What is this?
Talks at the OECD to tackle this multilaterally and agree across jurisdictions on how to do this have so far failed to land, in part because the U.S. Congress is divided on taxing big tech. And with even more congressional races tilting Republican this week, the prospects for a global deal on this seem less likely than ever.
So, Janice, how could all of this factor into the new NAFTA review in 2026?
Well, in earlier talks, Canada fought to get an exemption that allows it to subsidize and protect its cultural industries, something that's really politically sensitive, especially in Quebec. Elizabeth Trujillo from the University of Houston's Law Center told me that the rules for regulating and taxing digital services are emerging as a critical issue.
Canada may have some safe harbor under their cultural exception, which is arguable whether it's truly a cultural exception or not. But for sure, it'll be an issue for negotiation, I think.
Rather than retaliate against the Trudeau government's DST right away, the Biden administration filed a complaint triggering a NAFTA dispute process. We'll see if the incoming Trump administration is going to be patient enough to let that play out.
CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
Talks are set to resume this weekend to try to end the ongoing labor dispute grinding cargo to a halt at British Columbia's ports. A union representative says it's been ordered back into bargaining talks with the BC Maritime Employers Association. They'll be joined by federal mediators when they meet tomorrow afternoon. Federal Labor Minister Steve McKinnon had earlier criticized a lack of progress in the talks, saying there was a, quote, concerning lack of urgency. For the first time ever, Belgium is marking Canada's Indigenous Veterans Day with a national ceremony today. It's to honor those soldiers who fought in the First World War but never received recognition for their service. Some of their descendants have traveled to Europe for the events. The CBC's Kayla Hounsell is there.
They are Canadians bringing their Indigenous culture to Belgium. Among them, Nova Scotian Jeff Purdy, the great-great-grandson of Sam Glode, a Mi'kmaq soldier who received the Distinguished Conduct Medal for bravery.
It was on my bucket list. I've always wanted to come here to Belgium.
Today, a member of the Edmonton Police Service will unveil a plaque honoring another Indigenous Canadian, Alex Jacoto of Saskatchewan's Red Pheasant Cree Nation, an Olympian and Canada's first Indigenous police officer, serving with the Edmonton Police.
It's important to make visitors aware.
Virla Viana is with Visit Flanders, an organization that works to attract international visitors to the region. She's hosting the Canadian delegation as Belgium marks Canada's Indigenous Veterans Day for the first time.
Unfortunately, they didn't get the recognition they deserved during and after the war, so we want to give them now that respect and give them our eternal gratitude for what they did for our region.
Purdy's great-great-grandfather made it home, but many of his comrades are buried here.
The friendships that he created, so his spirit's still here.
He's grateful his family member, one of around 4,000 Indigenous Canadians who served in the First World War, is getting the recognition he deserves. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Ypres, Belgium.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, for news anytime, go to our website, cbcnews.ca. And you can listen to us live every morning on the CBC News app. Just tap on the local icon. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa on this mild Friday morning. Here's what's coming up on the show. November is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so coming up later on, we'll speak with the Manitoba Association of Women's Shelters about the current state of domestic violence in our province and what they say needs to change. An exhibit at Kildonan Place Mall shares firsthand stories of the men and women from Transcona who served during the World Wars. We'll speak with the curator of the Transcona Museum on why these stories are still so important today. But first, today is Indigenous Veterans Day, and we'll hear how one veteran from Peguis First Nation had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to honor his great-uncle who died in the First World War. Stick around. This is Information Radio. 11 minutes after 7 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, police are still investigating near the Airport Motor Inn at Ellis and Barrie after a serious assault there last night. A man is in critical condition at last word. Officers have been there since 10 last night. They're still asking people to avoid the area. CBC's Megan Ketchison is there and will bring us the latest coming up. Winnipeg's mayor says the city needs more money from the province to staff its fire and paramedic service. City staff forecasts the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service will overspend its budget this year by $16.4 million. Overtime alone accounts for more than $7 million of that. We're going to hear from the head of the Fire Paramedic Union in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba Newsroom. And joining me now from the control room is our studio technician and weather specialist, Abby Adiemi. Hi, Abby.
I am another day with plenty of sunshine, light breeze in the forecast. We're going to see temperatures ranging from chilly starts in the north, and then it's going to get to like milder conditions down south. Right now, we're still stuck at 2 degrees. Plenty of sunshine in the forecast for Winnipeg today. Light breeze will be picking up later. We're going to see our highs reaching 9 degrees. And then for tonight, the skies will remain clear as we head into the evening with breezy nights and temperatures dropping to a low of around 3 degrees. We're still seeing that light snow up north in Churchill at this time at 9 degrees. And Thompson is seeing clear conditions at 7. And down south, we're seeing temperatures for Brandon and Dauphin at -5. Similar condition in Steinbach, and then Maurice, Gimli are both hovering between -1 and -2 at this time. So in summary, we're looking at a sunny day ahead, plenty of sunshine, light winds, temperatures reaching from 9 degrees to 12 in most of the areas, and the winds will be picking up at times, but it's going to ease off as we get into the afternoon, and then some clear and chilly conditions tonight in some places. But for tomorrow, another sunny day on the way, breezy conditions in the morning, and we should be getting to 13 tomorrow. So I'll take it. Right now, 2 downtown, -4 at the airport. Lovely day ahead.
And a nice weekend coming up, too.
A nice weekend coming up for sure.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby Adiemi at the controls this morning. And with him in the control room is Kevin Nipatebo, who's producing our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, streaming live right now. And with me in the studio is Corey Funk, our show director, who has an update on the traffic. What's going on?
Yeah, reminder, we just heard from Heather, but a reminder for folks that that there's that investigation going on of a serious assault at Ellis and Barrie right now. And so that means that Ellis between Barrie and Marjorie both ways is closed to vehicles and pedestrian traffic. And it sounds like in terms of the conversations the newsroom's been having with the police, might be closed for a good chunk of the morning. So you're going to want to avoid that area if you can. Up north, still looking at the highways, and it's looking like the highway 280 from Thompson to Gillam, not great conditions still, according to Manitoba 511, being reported as covered. And then once you get past Split Lake, kind of like yesterday, still still poor visibility as well as you make your way between Split Lake and Gillam and eventually Sundance. So just heads up, very, very poor conditions, looks like at 280. But if you have any updates on that or anything else you're seeing down south here as well, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Quarter after 7, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, around the world on the CBC Listen app and on our website as well. We are streaming live on the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. I am Emily Brass. Well, besides a photo that hung on the walls of his grandfather's house, Winnipegger Randall McKenzie knew little to nothing about his great uncle. All he knew was his name, Oswald McCorrister, and that he died young, fighting in the First World War. It wasn't until Randall started looking into online records that he learned Oswald was buried in France, a world away from Peguis First Nation, where he's from. And while Randall hoped to one day visit his great uncle's grave, he never thought he'd get that chance. But that changed this past summer when he went to Paris for work. Randall's a videographer and one of our colleagues here at CBC Manitoba, and he was over there shooting for the Paris Olympics. He joins us now over Zoom to share more of his story. Good morning, Randall.
Good morning, Emily.
So growing up and seeing that picture of your great uncle Oswald, what did your grandfather tell you about him?
Grandpa never really said anything about who Oswald was in the portrait there. He basically just kind of kept it simple that it was his brother that had died in the war, and that was about it. We had just seen the picture hanging above, in between the bedroom doors in the hallway above the sewing machine, and he had that portrait there for a long, long time.
Was the war something that was hard for your grandfather to talk about?
I'm not sure. My grandfather was pretty old. We were young, we were just young when we seen him, when he was still around, and I don't know why they didn't talk too much about it, other than to say that it was his brothers that had died in the war.
Yeah, it's not an easy subject. So what made you start researching Oswald and other relatives online?
I served in the Canadian Forces as a naval radio operator. And so I had a big interest in Remembrance Day and understanding what the significance is. And it was when the internet was just kind of being born, and then all the digitization of all the records happened, and I was able to search through quite a few of them, including the Canadian Virtual War Museum and the Manitoba Vital Statistics, and kind of connect all the dots together about who my family was, and mainly my grandfather's family. My grandfather was only 10 years old when Oswald had died, so he didn't really know who Oswald was, I guess.
Yeah. So what did you learn about your uncle's time fighting in the First World War?
Oh, I learned quite a bit. I'm a little bit. It's shocking to kind of read his medical records. They're all online now, and his service records is all online, and so I was able to read that and be able to see these papers that would describe when he was wounded, when he was released, and where, and things like that. So I learned quite a bit about what happened to them, I guess, because there was two brothers that went to war. There was actually three brothers, I believe, that went to war, because his father's name was William, and then the older brother named William went, and also Oswald, but I believe there was also another brother named Robert that went as well.
Wow. And then, of course, you found out about where he was buried and you finally got to visit his gravesite in France. How did that feel?
Well, we took an Uber to the ETAP military cemetery there. And when we arrived there, it was the grounds are very well kept, really all the grass was mowed and all the irises trimmed back, and there's like maple trees planted around the cemetery, and it was very solemn and very like just solemn. When you got there, you knew that, wow, this is a site from the war. And thankfully, I guess there's a commission of countries that take care of all these cemeteries, and I guess because of the D-Day celebrations that happened earlier there, this place is really nice and clean, and it was quite a thing to see it, and to know that all those headstones represent a person.
And I mean, what's the significance for your family of you going to that grave?
Well, I guess the significance is that I'm like the first one to go and actually see it. There was no picture online of it. There was just a notation of where it was and what section it was. And when you're at the cemetery there, all the headstones are marked, so it's very easy to find. And we just walked over to the right section there and walked down the row, and just second to the last at the end of the row, there was his headstone.
And what did you do to honor him when you found that headstone?
I was really like in a surreal place, because I could see my grandpa's name there, my McCorrister, right? And like knowing that, I'm like, boy, I'm thousands of miles away from home, and this is like family here. I left a handful of berries there, strawberries and blueberries and all that, just as an offering to feed the spirit. It's sort of like feeding the fire ceremony, where you would offer offer food to the fire that would feed the spirit of your ancestors there. But I also left a penny as a token that a family member visited the site, and just so that other people coming by will know that, family was there.
Mm-hmm. And describe the flag that you left there.
I took this flag and I put it down there. It's a Canadian flag with a picture of an Indigenous man that's over top of it there. It's my flag that I like to fly for Indigenous Day, and I placed it on the ground there just to have a little ceremony of my own and a little moment of silence to remember. And just as we're finishing that, a couple of people from France had showed up there, and through Google Translate, the app there, I was able to explain to them who I was and how I was related to this person. And the only word they said to me back was the word respect. And they understood I was there to respect the service and sacrifice of my uncle there, great uncle.
Mm-hmm. And, today is Indigenous Veterans Day, as a formal naval radio operator for the armed forces yourself. And, given what happened to your great uncle, like, what does Indigenous Veterans Day mean to you?
It's a time just to remember the service, to remember, for me, I remember my service time and the people I was with. Now I'm a little bit older now. I know that some of the people I've served with have passed on, and so it's knowing that my uncle was so young when he died, makes me, sad that he never had a future, um, and proud that, like, wow, like the bravery to leave these beautiful fields here in Manitoba to go to a war zone in a country that that he probably never ever thought he'd ever be in. That's bravery.
Yeah, what a sacrifice. Thank you so much, Randall, for joining us this morning and sharing your family story.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad. Thank you for your interest.
Randall McKenzie is a Canadian Forces veteran. He's a member of Peguis First Nation and a videographer here at CBC Manitoba. And for more on Indigenous Veterans Day, you can visit our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, Canadians pause to reflect and remember, honoring those who have served and remembering those we have lost. On Monday, live from the National War Memorial in Ottawa, join CBC News for special coverage of the Remembrance Day ceremony on radio, TV, CBC News Network, and on CBC Gem, CBC Explore, and local streaming channels.
7:25, you're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, and it's time now for some sports news. Scott Regehr joins us from the CBC Sports Desk. Good morning, Scott.
Hey there, Emily.
So the Jets, and their goalie in particular, got some sweet revenge last night?
Oh, I would say so. Connor Hellebuck backstopping Winnipeg to a 1-0 victory over the Colorado Avalanche. Of course, that's the team that eliminated Winnipeg from the playoffs last season. And Hellebuck just wants to forget about those playoffs. They were not particularly good for him. But boy, has he been, well, he's the best goalie on the planet. And he's showed that not just in last night's game where he stopped 35 Colorado shots, but in the prior game where, remember, he shut out Utah. So that's 2 in a row. Hellebuck was asked when the last time was that he posted 2 clean sheets consecutively.
Probably college, yeah. Probably college. Had a good amount of shutouts in college, but yeah, I've been waiting for an opportunity like this, and just perfect storm. Number 40 feels really good. It's one of those milestones. One more is just the 300 wins, and I really look forward to that this season. Hopefully I can achieve it, but this one feels really good.
Yeah, so Hellebuck sitting at 285 wins on his stellar career. When he reaches 300, he'll become just the 5th American goalie to manage that feat. And a reminder that the Jets, who continue their homestand tomorrow against Dallas, Emily, the game has been moved earlier in the day because of a certain football contest.
A certain football contest. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, speaking of football, what's the latest ahead for tomorrow's Western Final?
Well, we're all getting excited to get this going between the Bombers and the Riders. The Riders, remember, haven't won in Winnipeg since 2018 when they had Zach Collaros as their quarterback. So they are the underdogs big time in this one. Now, for me, a big talking point, maybe the biggest, is Brady Oliveira, the stellar running back for the Bombers, who is probably going to win the Most Outstanding Player award this season. He was not very good during the regular season against the Green and White. In fact, he failed to top, despite leading the league in rushing, top 50 yards in any of the 3 contests he played against the Riders. They have the best run defense in the CFL, Saskatchewan. So that, something's got to give there. And that's what I'll be watching. Here's what Oliveira had to say.
Everyone knows the way that we started the season, but I think we've been getting hot at the right time. And you can say the same thing about their squad as well. They're playing some really good football right now, and this is why both of us are in this game coming up on Saturday. We've both earned the right to play in the West Final. We're 2 of the best teams in the West, and we're going to go out there and fight it out and see who gets top spot and moves on to the Grey Cup.
Grey Cup in Vancouver this year, of course. Well, there will be controlled conditions in the Dome. Might want to have a Dome in town tomorrow night because it's going to be windy, very windy. 30K winds gusting to 50, which means Brady Oliveira is going to be all the more important because the quarterbacks aren't going to want to throw in those conditions. So can't wait. Western Final tomorrow, Riders and the Bombers.
And chilly too. Bundle up. It can get cold watching those games.
Yep.
And finally in soccer, the Canadian Premier League final goes tomorrow, Scott.
Yes, it does. Of course, Valor FC long since out of things in this league, but Calgary, I guess the specific name is Cavalry FC out of Calgary, and Hamilton's Forge FC will meet for the North Star Cup awarded to the best team in the CPL. Hamilton Forge has been a juggernaut, winning the North Star Cup in 4 of the past 5 seasons. They will be the favorite. So we'll see what gives at Spruce Meadows, where it's a sellout in Calgary, and that will be broadcast live on CBC's main television network starting tomorrow at 2 Central Time.
Okay, I think you just made plans for a lot of people listening right now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Scott.
You betcha.
That's Scott Regehr from the CBC Sports Desk. The news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is 2 degrees in downtown Winnipeg. It's going to be beautifully sunny in Winnipeg today. A bit of a south breeze, not as windy as yesterday, not as warm as yesterday, but still warmer than seasonal. Today's high is 9. Winnipeg police are still investigating near the Airport Motor Inn at Ellis and Barrie after a serious assault there last night. Part of that busy St. James Street remains closed. CBC reporter Megan Ketchison is there right now and joins us live. Megan?
Well, for the past couple of hours now, the Winnipeg Police Forensic Unit has been focusing on the bus shelter that is in front of the Airport Motor Inn. This is at Barrie and on Ellis Avenue between Barrie and Marjorie. Now, around 10 o'clock last night, there was a serious assault. One man was taken to hospital in critical condition. We don't have an update on his condition at this time, and there are a number of people that are in custody being questioned. Now, we've seen a number of things here that the forensics unit has been bagging up. There's a shoe, a shopping bag, a jacket, and they've been photographing the inside of this bus shelter for a good part of the morning. This, right now, Ellis is closed between Barrie and Marjorie. This is a very busy route for people coming back from the airport. So keep that in mind if that's a part of your route this morning. We're hoping for more information later on today. Reporting live, Megan Ketchison, CBC News.
Thank you so much, Megan. The head of the Union for Winnipeg Firefighters says the city only has itself to blame for a big budget overrun this year. City staff forecasts the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service will overspend its budget this year by $16.4 million. Overtime alone accounts for more than $7 million of that. Tom Billis, president of the United Firefighters of Winnipeg, says call volumes continue to rise, yet the city has done nothing to change its staffing levels.
People are working overtime, but you need time to recuperate. You cannot and should not always be working on your time off. So what happens is our members get burnt out and then they start to just outright decline over time.
Mayor Scott Gillingham says more revenue is needed to keep up with Winnipeg's population growth and spikes in homelessness and addictions. He says the city is in talks with the province about finding that extra funding. Family and people in Poplar River First Nation are remembering that community's newly elected chief. Tanya Bittern died Saturday following a medical issue just 4 days after she was elected. She was set to officially become chief on November 4th. Bittern previously served as a councillor in the Eastern Manitoba Fly-In First Nation. She also worked as the director of the Head Start program, which helps parents and their children. Ed Hudson is her uncle.
That was her plan, to work with kids all her lifetime. And when she was growing up, she was always very trusting person, loving person, helpful, and she was always jolly and jubilant and happy. We all loved her.
Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Acting Grand Chief Betsy Kennedy says Bittern will be deeply missed as a colleague, a friend, mother, grandmother, sister, and partner. A councillor in Poplar River is now serving as acting chief until next steps are decided. Violence overnight in the Netherlands, fueled by tensions in the Middle East and sparked by a Europa League football match. Fans of a visiting Israeli soccer team clashed with rioters in central Amsterdam. More than 50 arrests have been made and 5 people are in hospital. Benjamin Netanyahu's office has released a statement saying the assault of our citizens in Amsterdam will not be overlooked. Immigration and border are on the agenda as the newly revived Canada-U.S. Relations Committee meets later this morning in Ottawa. Donald Trump's pending return to the White House is raising concerns a potential wave of migrants might try to cross into Canada. You can hear more on those stories as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Today is Indigenous Veterans Day. Justin Woodcock is the First Nation Veteran Coordinator at the Manitoba Southern Chiefs Organization. He is also a veteran with 8 years of service.
There's some questions about, well, why do First Nation veterans need their own day? And it's about honoring those distinct injustices that they faced upon their return home. We're valid, our experience is valid, and we have a lot to offer.
According to Statistics Canada, as of 2021, there were more than 1,500 Indigenous veterans in Manitoba. Well, 13 wins in 14 starts now for the Winnipeg Jets. Gabe Velarde at the very start of the first period on TSN with the only goal of the game. The Winnipeg Jets holding back the Avalanche 1-0. It is the second straight shutout for Connor Hellebuck and his 40th career shutout.
Number 40 feels really good. It's one of those milestones. One more is just the 300 wins, and I really look forward to that this season. Hopefully I can achieve it, but this one feels really good.
Hellebuck making 35 saves last night. The Jets are back in action for a matinee tomorrow, hosting Dallas. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
You know what I really love about us being on YouTube these days, Heather?
Tell me.
Is I get to see you smile when you play that goal sound effect. You just beam and light up. You're so happy for the Jets.
Go Jets, go.
All right, that's the spirit, and we're going to take it all the way. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. 7:36, time for an update on the forecast with Avi Adiemi.
Plenty of sunshine in the forecast with light breeze today. 2 degrees in Winnipeg. It's clear outside. Today will bring plenty of sunshine for the city. We will see some light breeze in the afternoon. Our high would get to 9 degrees, but expect some chilly conditions as you start your day. And this clear condition will stay with us into the evening. And it might get breezy at some point. We'll drop to about 3 degrees later tonight. Brandon sitting at -5 and mostly clear at this time. Expect some sunny skies. The fog is already lifting. It was spotted earlier, but that should be lifting as you get into the morning. The high for that region will get to 12, though it feels like a -10 this morning due to the wind chill. Further north, moving north to Thompson, we have a -7 at this time. It's mainly clear out there. Today brings a mix of sun and clouds and a chance of a light snow and freezing rain later this afternoon. For your highs, you might see a high close to 4 degrees. The wind chill this morning makes it feel like -10. Further north in Churchill, it is -9. The light snow is still being felt. It should taper off as you get into the morning with sun and cloud making its presence felt later in the day. Expect breezy conditions in the afternoon and a high of -2, though it feels like -20 this morning, so you might want to brace for that. We're going to see some freezing rain later in the day, making the temperature get to about 3 degrees for folks in Churchill. Dauphin, -5 and clear. Today will be sunny. We also saw some fog in that region. It's going to be lifting as you get into the morning. The highs would get to 12. Gimli is at -2 and clear. Forecast for the Interlake region calls for plenty of sunshine with breezy conditions picking up later, and then it's going to be easing as you get into the afternoon. Our highs would get to 9 for folks in Gimli. Steinbach is sitting at -4 and clear. Today also promises to be another sunny one with breezy conditions picking up later. Your high will touch 9 degrees. Moritz, -3 and clear. Today's forecast for the Pembina Valley region calls for lots of sunshine, a light breeze this afternoon. The high will touch 10 degrees, and it just feels chilly this morning, around a -5. That's what the wind chill is making it feel like. And then tonight you'll see some clear skies, and you drop to about 3 degrees. So across the province, we're going to see sunshine, light breeze developing later, and highs will be ranging from 9 in the south 9, 10, 14 in the south to 4 degrees up north, and brisker conditions in some areas.
Even though it's chillier up north, pretty mild for this time of year.
For this time of the year, for sure.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby Adeyemi. He's also our studio technician, and with him in the control room is Kevin DiPatebo, who is producing our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel this morning. And joining me now in studio is Corey Funk, our show director and our traffic reporter. What's up, Corey?
Yeah, well, we heard in the news, I just want to reiterate that the Winnipeg Police Service is investigating a serious assault at the area of Ellis and Barrie. So that means that on Ellis, from Barrie to Marjorie, both ways is closed. And it sounds like from conversations our newsroom has been having with the police that it will be closed for quite a while. So just heads up there. You want to avoid that area. As well, just looking up north, a reminder to folks, if you're driving anywhere between Thompson and Gillam Sundance today, the highway is still being reported as covered and with some poor visibility once you get past Split Lake heading towards Gillam. So just heads up there. Could be some rough conditions if you're heading down the 280 today. If you see anything else going on, though, up north, down south, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
That's Corey Funk, our show director and traffic reporter. It's 20 minutes before 8 o'clock. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, around the world on the Listen app, and streaming live on the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. I'm Emily Brass, sitting in as your host today. Well, November's the time when we remember the veterans who served for Canada and the soldiers who never came home. An exhibit by the Transcona Museum aims to make that experience more personal by highlighting people from that community of Transcona who took part in the war effort. Stories of remembrance from hometown to the front lines is on display at Kildonan Place Mall until Remembrance Day on Monday. Alana Horeda is the Transcona Museum's curator. Good morning, Alana.
Good morning.
So can you first just describe the exhibit, what people will see?
The exhibit is made up of 18 pop-up banners, and on each banner, we're telling one specific story, a firsthand experience using quotes written by the people who were there or experienced it, to tell different stories about Transcona and the war effort and the people who served, both overseas and what was happening at home.
Okay. And so with these stories that you're posting on these banners, I mean, how did you find out all this information about people from Transcona who were involved in the war?
Since the museum was first founded, we have been collecting information of Transconians who served. And we also have the local newspaper. So going through the newspapers, we have honor roll lists that were made from different, like Central School. We have a list for World War II of students who served. We have we have a church honor roll list. We have one from the CN shop. So using that information, compiling, and then just researching online and personal stories that people have submitted to us, letters in our archives, we've been able to gather these stories.
So, and how, as you did all that research, I mean, what was it like hearing about the things that people went through during the World Wars?
It's, a lot of it is somewhat difficult to read. And these are just snippets that fit on a nice little banner. We have more information, but these are things that people went through. These are things that people saw and that they experienced. So we feel it's important that we share that for everyone so that they can know, but also, we're holding and we're preserving that history as well.
And you mentioned, maybe some of the letters and cards. Like, what did you read on those?
We have a lot of letters and cards that were sent to the Transcona War Efforts Committee, and a lot of those were written by soldiers during World War II, thanking the War Efforts Committee for sending them socks or chocolate, and reading through those and just hearing, they often say, oh, everything is fine here, and everything wasn't fine, but they couldn't say what was happening. But I have read letters written by individuals who then I know were killed a few weeks later. Is that the last time they wrote a letter home? Am I holding their last words in my hands? That's pretty powerful.
Kind of chilling. Like I did get some chills thinking of that. Tell us another one of the stories that stood out to you when you're doing all this work.
One of the stories, one of the ones that I enjoy, is we're looking at Transcona and its connection to the French Resistance. So there was a Hollywood star, Drew Leighton Tartier, and she had been in Hollywood, made some Hollywood movies, and then moved to France and married her husband there. And she became part of the French Resistance. And an RCAF plane was shot down, and she ended up with some of those airmen in her house. And one of the gentlemen was from Transcona. And so she helped take care of him and move him through the French Resistance. And she wrote a book about it. And in the book, she even mentions Dan Murphy, the Transconian. So, we have that connection too. And you wouldn't think a Hollywood starlet saving a Transconian during World War II. That's not something you would think about, but it happened.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of women were involved in the war effort, and you highlight some of their experiences during the World Wars. What can you tell us about that?
Well, we definitely, during the First World War, we don't know of any women who served. During the Second World War, we do know of women who served. There were women who served at home and overseas. In the display at the mall right now, we have a women's RCAF jacket, and by looking at the badges, we can tell that she actually served overseas. Researching that uniform is how we were able to determine that. Unfortunately, we don't have too much information about the women who wore the uniform. We're still doing some digging on that. But women also worked during the home front. The cordite plant, which was just east of Transcona, is one of those industries that did hire women. So we do know of women working at the cordite plant, which was manufacturing cordite and nitroglycerin for the war effort. So we do have these experiences of women as well.
Yeah, and I imagine too, like you mentioned, those packages of socks and chocolate. Like I bet women were responsible for a lot of those things being sent to soldiers.
Yeah, we in our archives we have Red Cross knitting instructions on how to make socks and things like that. Yeah, the care packages that were put together and sent overseas. Women who were then just at home with their children while their husbands or other family members were overseas. So like the experience for women is both as civilian but also as part of the war effort as enlisted individuals as well.
And of course, there were also some noteworthy animals who were connected to Transcona during the war and helped with the effort. What did you learn about them?
Yeah, it's a story that we found in our archive. The HMCS Transcona, which was a minesweeper ship named after the community agreed to sponsor it. That ship had a mascot, and that mascot was a dog named Skipper. And Skipper lived on the ship with all the sailors. And the gentleman, I guess he kind of took on the role of taking care of Skipper, wrote us a letter a number of years ago telling us all about Skipper and how he took him onto the beach one day. And then there were some women walking towards him, and Skipper had never seen a woman before and didn't know what these creatures were. And so kind of ran away, and he had to go catch the dog. But a lot of ships, different battalions and things, they had animal mascots that they had with them too. So, it's very interesting seeing that side of the story as well.
Yeah. And so meanwhile, the exhibit's there at Kildonan Place Mall. When people are walking by doing their shopping, they notice the display. How do they react?
The display is very visually appealing. We tried really hard to gain people's interest with a quick look. We do see people who are walking by and they take, they do a double look. Then we have people who stop and read the whole exhibit. And then I had someone come up to me yesterday and said, I specifically came from Oakbank to see this, and we come every year to see your exhibit. So that's really special. But, you'll see people and some of the darker stories or ones that we have, they're taking their time. You can see on their face that they're taking it in. And, that's why we're there. We're there to tell the story.
And of course, as we know, there are a number of wars going on right now on our planet. How do you hope the display helps people reflect on what's going on today?
Well, this display, we really tried to get a first person's point of view. We wanted the words from the person who experienced it, because there are no more World War I veterans left alive, and there are fewer and fewer World War II veterans left alive. And what is going on today is very different. We can hear from people firsthand what's happening with social media, and that is very powerful. So, it ties into the power of words and being able to see what's happening. So while it would be great if there was no more wars, and that wasn't something that we were seeing, but being able to connect to an experience and sort of imagine it for yourself is very powerful. And that's a way of learning and sort of understanding what people went through.
Alana, thanks so much for joining us and telling us all about this.
You're so welcome.
Alana Horeda is curator of the Transcona Museum. Stories of remembrance from hometown to the front lines is on display at the center court of Kildonan Place Mall until it closes on Remembrance Day.
CBC Marketplace has got your back. From sneaky phone scams and unsafe products to hospital wait times impacting the health of children.
Tell me what you're thinking right now.
I just hate that he's had to go through this. And, if he'd had his surgery earlier, it would never have gotten to this situation. He would never be this severe.
Hospital wait times on CBC Marketplace with Asha Tomlinson and David Common. Sunday afternoon at 12:30, 1 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
10 minutes to 8 o'clock. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. And still to come on the show, coming right up, is how product labeling in the U.S. and Canada can be vastly different, even on the same items. And we'll hear how this country's lackluster rules on labeling may be to blame. We're going to hear from Charlie Agro on that as well. All month long, the Manitoba Association of Women's Shelters will be sharing messages on social media to raise more awareness about gender-based violence in our province. After 8, we'll hear why they say the problem is only getting worse. Well, this next song is a hopeful one. It's about conquering your fears and overcoming self-imposed obstacles. From AV and the inner city, this is Lion at the Gate.
Oh, there's a lion at the gate of heaven. Everybody knows. There's a lion at the gate of heaven. Haunts you like a ghost. There's a lion at the gate of heaven, just as you're getting close, so close. Oh, there's a lion at the gate, if only it would go. I had shoes with tangled laces. Tried to run solo, three-legged races. So strange, even circles have so many hiding places. And whiskey can make everything so fine. Oh, there's a lion at the gate of heaven. Everybody knows. There's a lion at the gate of heaven. Haunts you like a ghost. Just there's a lion at the gate of heaven. Just as you're getting close, so close. Oh, there's a lion at the gate. If only it would go. I jumped through hoops and into a pit.
from Edmonton. That was AV and the Inner City with Lion at the Gate. Well, still to come on Information Radio, we're going to speak with Charles Agro from Marketplace. Just having some technical issues reaching her right now, but we're going to hear more about their latest investigation into product labeling and why lackluster labeling rules in this country could leave you questioning that some food marketing might be misleading. Just a few minutes before national news time, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, and Heather Wells has the CBC Manitoba headlines.
Good morning. Well, a man at last word remains in critical condition after a serious assault. Winnipeg police were called to the Airport Motor Inn at Ellis and Barrie around 10 o'clock last night. They are focusing their investigation on a bus shelter in that area. Police have taken a number of people into custody for questioning. For now, Ellis is still closed between Barrie and Marjorie to both vehicles and pedestrians, and you're being asked to avoid that area. So that's on Ellis between Barrie and Marjorie. The newly elected chief of Poplar River First Nation is being remembered for her leadership and work with families. Chief Tanya Bittern died on Saturday following a medical issue. She died just 4 days after she was elected. She was going to officially become chief of Poplar River on November 4th. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. Just a few minutes before 8 o'clock, and we have a special traffic report from Marcy Marcusa.
Hey, I'll tell you what, I saw that you guys had time for this, and I was just driving in. I'm doing some training, so thanks for filling in for me. I love this. I was driving to work, and I'm on Sherbrooke, and they got the bike lane. Mm-hmm. And sometimes Winnipeggers, I'm sorry, we're all in this together, but sometimes, you get over to make your turn onto Portage Avenue, and you kind of go, oh, no, there's a bike there. Oh, I'll go this way. Or maybe you're even annoyed at a cyclist. Me and this other motorist had the best moment. We were actually blocking the bike lane, and then the bike started coming up, and we both moved gently back over, let the bike go, because that's their right of way. The bike went by. The person behind me stopped. As the cyclist went by, she looked at me and she waved this huge smile like, thank you. And then the person behind me let me in, and we turned onto Portage Avenue East, and then when he passed me, he and I looked at each other and gave like a virtual high five, like,
yes.
Yeah, we can drive with cyclists, Winnipeg. Yes, we can.
That's the way to do it. Respect one another out on the road.
It was just so lovely, all three of us out there. So have a safe drive, everyone.
Great moment. Thanks for sharing that. That's Marcy Marcusa, the usual host of Information Radio. She's got some other projects going on, so I am filling in for you today. I am Emily Brass, and still to come, November's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We're going to speak with the Manitoba Association of Women's Shelter about the current state of domestic violence in Manitoba and what they say still needs to change. We're also going to connect with Charles Agro from Marketplace and hear how product labeling in the U.S. and Canada can be vastly different, even on the same items, and hear how this country's lackluster rules on labeling might be to blame for that. It's 2 degrees and clear right now at the Forks. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1 from Winnipeg. World Report's coming up next.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
This year, the film that won the big prize at the Cannes Film Festival was the film Honora by the director Sean Baker, about a young girl who's a sex worker who marries the son of a Russian billionaire.
It's a frog marriage, and we're getting in an old SAP.
Sean will be here to tell you his story and what it's actually like to win the big prize. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Protests outside a Hindu temple in Brampton, Ontario have led to violence as tensions escalate after Canada accused the Indian government of crimes against the Sikh community here. What would it take to diffuse the tensions? That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. We begin in Amsterdam in an overnight outburst of violence fueled by tensions in the Middle East and sparked by a Europa League soccer match where police say 5 people were hospitalized, more than 60 others detained after a night of violence targeting Israeli soccer fans. Crystal Gomansing has the latest.
Even before the match, social media posts showed groups of men running through the streets of Amsterdam fighting. After the game, hundreds of Israeli fans and pro-Palestinian protesters clashed. Exactly what happened is still unclear. There are videos showing Maccabi Tel Aviv fans taunting Arabs in the city and a Palestinian flag being torn off a building. Israelis were attacked. Political leaders in Israel told people in Amsterdam to shelter in hotels. Plans were set in motion for a military extraction, and former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett posted this message on social media.
Jews are being attacked at multiple locations with brutal force. It's a pogrom in action.
Pogrom describes a violent expelling used often in relation to when Jews were attacked and driven out of Europe before the Second World War. Early Friday, Dutch Prime Minister David Schoof issued a statement. The images and reports we are hearing are absolutely scandalous and reprehensible, he said. This is simply anti-Semitic violence against Israelis. Israel's National Security Council has issued a warning to Israelis and Jews in Amsterdam, calling on those who are out in public not to display any Israeli or Jewish symbols. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is moving quickly to build his Oval Office inner circle. He's appointed Susie Wiles as his chief of staff.
Susie likes to stay sort of in the back, let me tell you. The Ice Maiden. We call her the Ice Maiden.
That's Trump thanking Wiles during his victory speech on Tuesday night. Wiles was one of his campaign managers and will now become the main gatekeeper of the Trump presidency. The CBC's Karen Pauls is in Washington. Karen, Trump is making history with this appointment. What more can you tell us?
Well, for the first time in U.S. history, a woman will be a White House chief of staff. It's one of the few jobs in the federal government never to be held by a woman, and one that holds a lot of power as gatekeeper to the president. Susan Wiles will manage the White House staff, organize Donald Trump's time and schedule, and be his main contact with other government departments and lawmakers. After appointing her, Trump described her as tough, smart, innovative, universally admired and respected. Some say she's the most feared and least known political operative in America. Here's some reaction from David Axelrod, former advisor to Barack Obama, and Sir Michael Singleton, a Republican strategist.
Chief of staff is very effective if the feeling around Washington is that chief of staff has the confidence of the president. And the fact that they've developed this close relationship, very important.
This signals that the second coming of a Trump presidency is going to be very different.
And that's partly because she reportedly told Trump she needs to have more control over who has access to him. John Trump is known to be influenced by the first people who talk to him, so Wiles wants to prevent unofficial advisors from swaying him.
And Karen, Wiles has a long history with the Republican Party.
She does. She's a seasoned Florida-based political strategist and lobbyist. She worked on Ronald Reagan's campaign ahead of his 1980 election. She's worked with Rick Scott, now a U.S. Senator, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. This is the third Trump campaign she's worked on.
CBC's Karen Pauls in Washington. Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome.
The federal government's newly revived Committee on Canada-U.S. Relations is holding its first meeting today as they prepare for Donald Trump's presidential comeback. One thorny issue, the digital services tax, a 3% tax on foreign tech giants that generate revenue from Canadian users. Let's bring in Janice McGregor from our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, why has this been such a problem in the Canada-U.S. relationship?
John, for progressives in Canada, asking big global tech firms to pay tax on the millions, even billions of dollars in revenue they make off social media or search engine advertising, streaming services, cloud storage, well, that only seems fair. These are services that don't recognize borders, and they've become a bigger and bigger share of the economy. But for American politicians, these corporations are their titans. And from Elon Musk on down, tech executives are expected to have a big voice in the second Trump administration. And they argue that this 3% digital services tax that Canada implemented last summer unfairly shakes down American success. International trade lawyer Mark Warner thinks Canada should brace for retaliation here.
Because it looks like, wait a sec,
The only companies they're hitting are big American companies. What do you say? You're our best friend and you're going after our big companies? What is this?
Talks at the OECD to tackle this multilaterally and agree across jurisdictions on how to do this have so far failed to land, in part because the U.S. Congress is divided on taxing big tech. And with even more congressional races tilting Republican this week, the prospects for a global deal on this seem less likely than ever.
CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
And this just in, there wasn't much growth in Canada's job market last month. Statistics Canada has just released its report for October. It shows the economy added just 15,000 jobs last month, not enough to change unemployment rates from 6.5%. CBC's senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong has more.
Economists had been expecting something stronger than this. Remember, last month, the Canadian economy added more than 3 times this number. Part-time jobs were lost, but more than replaced by the number of full-time jobs added. But the main thing we've been focused on and looking at for a while now has been the unemployment rate. And it held steady, but only because the participation rate fell. In other words, fewer people are actually out there looking for work. So a real mixed bag of results here. And we're back at that stage in the cycle where we look at everything through the lens of what does this mean for the Bank of Canada? The Bank of Canada is, of course, making another interest rate decision a month from now, and it's going to have to decide if it wants to cut by a quarter point or a half point. And there's kind of something for everyone on that front in this report. But economists think the Bank of Canada is likely going to stay aggressive and try to get more stimulus into the economy, so leaning more towards a 50 basis point cut in a month's time. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, it may be hard to believe, but for the first time in more than 3 years, Canadian rental prices fell on a yearly basis in October. But a national report from rentals.ca and real estate data from Urbanation show prices only dropped in major cities. And one tenant advocate says there's still a long way to go. Jenna Benchertrit reports.
More apartment buildings are going up across Canada, and that means rents are coming down. In fact, average asking rents fell 1.2% for the first time since the pandemic, and the trend is mostly playing out in big cities like Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and Calgary. Demand is down due to fewer international students, and developers are also finishing a whole lot of construction. Steve Pomeroy researches housing at McMaster University.
What we're now seeing is the beginning of those units coming onto the market, so that is helping to meet the demand.
Pomeroy also thinks landlords are dropping rents in cities like Toronto because prices have hit a ceiling.
And they've already gone up to what the market can currently bear. There isn't much else to go.
But Toronto tenant advocate Jordy Dent sees it differently.
When rents hit a ceiling, you just stuff another renter in there to pay the rent.
And, big picture, the annual cost of rent in Canada is still only $50 less per month than the $2,200 record high set in June.
Things have to come down a lot more just to return to some semblance of affordability.
It's a different story in smaller markets, where rental prices are still rising as more Canadians move for cheaper housing. Jenna Benchertrit, CBC News, Toronto.
And finally, Beyonce's crossover album, Cowboy Carter, has certainly enjoyed massive success this year, but the big question now is, will it get recognition as a country album by the music industry's highest honor? We'll find out this morning when the Grammy Award nominations are announced. And it's not just Queen Bee.
I got a sight in my rifle, my mama's new boyfriend rebinds Bibles.
Post Malone's F1 Trillion could also be nominated for a country album this year. Neither he nor Beyonce have previously been associated with the genre at the awards.
Exactly what I'm looking for, 'cause I'm looking for someone.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, sitting in as your host today. Here's what's still to come on the show. November is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we're going to speak with the Manitoba Association of Women's Shelters about the current state of domestic violence in our province and what they say still needs to change. And they're going to be speaking about these issues all month long to raise more awareness about gender-based violence in our province. Also ahead on the show, we'll speak with Charles Liagro from Marketplace about their latest investigation into product labeling and why lackluster labeling rules in this country could leave you questioning that some food marketing might be misleading. Stick around. You're listening to Information Radio. A lot more still to come. 11 minutes after 8 o'clock, Heather Wells has the CBC Manitoba News headlines.
Good morning. Well, police still investigating near the Airport Motor Inn on Ellis and Barrie after a serious assault there last night. A man is in critical condition at last word. Streets around there are closed, so we'll take you there for that update. Winnipeg's mayor says the city needs more money from the province to staff its fire paramedic service. We're going to hear from Scott Gillingham coming up. And Manitoba's jobless numbers are inching higher. Stats Canada is just out with the national unemployment rate, 6.5% in October. In Manitoba, our rate rose from 5.7% to 5.9% last month. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. And it's 11 minutes, almost 12 minutes after 8 o'clock. Time for an update on the forecast with Abby Adiyemi.
A sunny day ahead. Expect plenty of sunshine with light winds and temperatures reaching highs of 9 to 12 in most of the areas. Forecast for Winnipeg today is looking good. We're looking forward to a beautiful sunny day, beautiful Friday. We're going to see a high of 9 today. Right now, 1 in the downtown and -2 at the airport. A lovely high of 9 for the city today.
Okay, another beautiful one. I don't know if this is ever going to end, Abby. Maybe we can be optimistic.
Let's just soak it in.
Okay, thank you. That's Abby Adiyemi. He's also our studio technician. And with him in the control room is Kevin Nipatebo, who is producing our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel this morning. Joining me now in the studio is Corey Funk with an update on the traffic.
Yeah, as you just heard from Heather, Ellis between Barrie and Marjorie still closed for a police investigation both ways to pedestrians and vehicles. So be careful there. You want to avoid that if you can. Northern Manitoba, just keep an eye out if you're hitting the 280 today between Thompson, Gillam, Sundance. It's still being reported as covered on on Manitoba's highway reporting site here, Manitoba 511, and poor visibility, particularly after Split Lake, because you're heading northeast there towards Gillam. So look out for that. If you see anything else going on out there, though, give me a call. That number, 204-788-3093.
Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, around the world on the CBC Listen app and on our website. And you can also check us out live on the YouTube channel. That's our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. I'm Emily Brass, filling in for Marcy Marcusa today. November is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we've reached the Manitoba Association of Women's Shelters for an update on where our province stands. Advocates say the problem only seems to be getting worse. This year alone, Manitoba had 2 horrific cases of multiple homicides connected to intimate partner violence. Last February, a man was charged with killing 5 family members, including 3 young children and a teenage girl in the town of Carman. And in August, residents of McCreary were shocked and saddened after a man killed 3 of his former partner's relatives. So how do we better protect those in our community impacted by violence? Sungai Movingi Van Lan Diegem joins us now, provincial coordinator for the Manitoba Association of Women's Shelters. Good morning, Sungai.
Good morning, Emily. Thank you for speaking with me this morning.
Well, we appreciate you taking time to speak with us. So tell us, what do you think we're lacking when it comes to helping survivors of domestic violence?
I think one of the biggest concerns is that there is still stigma that surrounds domestic violence. So it is still treated as a behind closed doors problem between parties involved. And also people don't really know how to support someone who is experiencing domestic violence or gender-based violence. And so education is a huge piece in terms of being able to support individuals and families who are experiencing domestic violence.
And speaking of education, you've partnered up with an educational institution on this. Tell us about that.
Yes, so we're actually into the third cohort of a program that we're running in conjunction with Red River College. It's a micro-credential course to help us to fill the gap for staff, because unfortunately for our shelters, we are still experiencing very low numbers in terms of staffing. So it limits the supports that we're able to provide to people who are experiencing domestic violence. So this program, we're grateful that we were able to have this program, and it is funded by Wage Manitoba to be able to ensure that we are increasing our staffing levels and making sure that those who are in need find the supports they need.
And I mean, speaking of that need, how do you think we're going to bridge the gap between where we are now and where you'd like to be, on staffing, on response?
That is a very tough question, Emily. Again, it boils down to education and more resources. Unfortunately for our shelters, we don't have enough space. We are seeing such huge numbers, especially since the pandemic. We're seeing much longer stays. And so what that means is we've gone from 9 nights to 21 nights on average. And so that means also fewer people are able to stay in shelter. We've also gone from operating near capacity to constantly being at and over capacity. And these are all numbers that have come in since the pandemic. In addition to that, we're also seeing more complex situations and trauma that includes addictions, mental health, and homelessness due to the housing crisis. So in essence, if someone is experiencing intimate partner violence or gender-based violence, if they have nowhere to go in trying to leave their situation, they're less likely to leave their abusive partner. So still very many challenges, and those are resources that are needed. So affordable housing, more resources for our shelters. We need more space. We need more staffing. And in addition to that, education, public education. And we know that the government is trying and is putting in measures to fill in these gaps, but unfortunately, it's still not enough. It requires the whole community as a whole to step up.
And I mean, speaking of what you're having to respond to, just the awful situations, we touched on some of them in the intro. What are you seeing in terms of the severity of violence these days?
Unfortunately, the severity and violence is increasing. We are seeing more and more in terms of escalation. And what people don't understand is that domestic violence doesn't just stay static. It doesn't always just stay verbal. It can turn physical. And for the physical, it might not just be something small. It then evolves. And unfortunately, we're seeing this as we see families that are being murdered in the news.
Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, over the legislature, a bill that would have required Manitoba provincial court judges to take continuing education on intimate partner violence did not pass yesterday. What do you think when you hear that news?
We understand that government has a process it has to follow. And so it is disheartening knowing that there are measures that can be taken to be able to help and support and prevent some of the escalation that is happening. Requiring mandatory training for new judges and justices of the peace means more support for survivors, because one of the challenges is survivors are not believed. And so if the judicial system puts in place these laws, it adds to the weight of someone actually being believed. And that's one of the first hurdles that they experience. This would mean many more. This would only be one of many important steps, especially where we see Indigenous women and families disproportionately experiencing domestic violence. We understand that the government has this process that it needs to follow, but we hope that sooner rather than later, some of these laws will be enacted.
And I just have less than a minute right now, Sungai, but, before you go, for people who suspect someone they know might be experiencing abuse, what role can they play in helping people get out of those abusive situations?
Educating themselves. More often than not, families and friends are the first people to notice that something is different or something is wrong or something wrong is happening with someone. So being able to educate yourself on what are the resources that are out there, and how can you talk to someone who is going through something like that. People need to understand that typically it may take a person up to 7 times of trying to leave before they actually leave. So having that patience and meeting that individual or that family where they're at, but more, and for those who are looking for information on how to support others, we have lots of information on our website. You can visit moz.mb.ca or follow us on social media, on Instagram at moz_MB.
Thank you,
We are
Sungai.
sharing lots of information.
Yes, and then that information's out there. Thank you so much, Sungai. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sungai Movingi Van Landigam is provincial coordinator with the Manitoba Association for Women's Shelters.
Breaking this hour, CBC News brings you all the local, national, and international news you need to make sense of your world.
I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement.
Now's your chance to enjoy a free preview of Canada's source for breaking and live news.
The air raid sirens went off.
Find out why more Canadians choose CBC News Network over any other Canadian news channel. The CBC News Network free preview. On now.
22 minutes after 8 o'clock. Corey Funk has a quick update on the roads.
Yeah, just got a call from Megan Ketchison, who's on scene at Ellis and Barrie there, where there's a police investigation. She said the tape's coming down and cars are now able to move through Ellis from Barrie to Marjorie, which was closed. So that is now open, Ellis from Barrie to Marjorie. If you see anything else going on out there, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
That's our show director, Corey Funk. Well, same product, 2 different labels. That's the case, at least for American and Canadian cans of Canada Dry ginger ale. And why is that? Well, this country's lackluster labeling rules may be to blame. Charles E. Agro has more on Marketplace's latest labels investigation. She joins us now. Hi, Charles E.
Hi, good morning.
So tell us about those cans. What's happening?
Yeah, so if you were to buy a can of Canada Dry ginger ale here in Canada, you would see that it says made from real ginger. But if you were to buy that same can of ginger ale in the United States, that claim made from real ginger is not on American cans. So it turns out there was a class action lawsuit filed in the United States, and after that settlement, that claim was removed from the American cans. There was similar litigation here in Canada, but the claim was not removed from Canadian cans. So we took a closer look at some of those court documents. We found there's just one drop of ginger extract in about 70 cans of Canada Dry. And when we looked further into this, it turns out that the ginger extract in Canada Dry ginger ale is something called ginger oleoresin. Now, I spoke to a food and beverage scientist about this, Amy Prohl at Niagara College. She says that often these agents, these flavoring agents, are used in very small quantities. How small? Think parts per million. Here's Amy.
So a lot of flavoring agents are used in parts per million concentration. And again, that is like 1 drop per dozens or even hundreds of cans. And so, in all fairness, parts per million is typically considered trace or minute, but it is still labeled as an ingredient.
Now, the reason why trace or minute is important is because the Canadian Food Inspection Agency does have a regulation that says you cannot stress the presence of a substance or an ingredient in trace or minute quantities.
Wow. So trace quantities. Charlesie, tell us then, really, how much ginger is actually in a can of Canada Dry ginger ale? Does it satisfy those rules?
Well, here's what's so interesting. When we asked the consumer line here in Canada, how much ginger is actually in your ginger ale? They wouldn't tell us. They said that that's proprietary information. Now, We also spoke to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency about this. It turns out they actually did an investigation into that claim. But the CFIA says when they asked Canada Dry about that ginger extract, because Canada Dry said it's made from ginger root, they do satisfy that regulation. Now, we spoke to Canada Dry, but how come you took it off your cans in the States, but you didn't do that here? Well, Canada Dry says that's because they wanted to avoid costly and protracted litigation. They also tell us that the reason it's still on cans in Canada is because made from real ginger accurately describes the product as it's formulated, and Canada Dry says their products satisfy regulations in Canada and the United States. Now, if all of this has you scratching your head, Amy says she gets it. She can appreciate why these rules and regulations are confusing for consumers.
How food manufacturers prepare food and is considered standard practice by the industry is not how consumers perceive food to be prepared.
Now, you can see there's a bit of a disconnect happening.
Yeah. And it's not just ginger ale. You found other questionable labels when it comes to following the rules on packages and products. What else did you find?
Well, in the program, we look at a cereal. We also look at a margarine. And we also look at a juice. And the juice that we're looking at is Kiju pomegranate cherry juice. Now, on the front, you will see cherries and pomegranates. But if you take a closer look at the ingredient list, what's the first juice that's listed? Apple. Now, when we raised this issue with Kiju, we brought to their attention another CFIA regulation. And that regulation says that you cannot stress the absence, presence, or importance of an ingredient. Now, when we brought that up with Kiju agreed to put an apple on the front of the package. They also say that those images on the front, they're meant to describe the flavor of the product, and you can find apple on their ingredient list.
Okay. And so, Charlie, what about the CFIA, which makes these labeling rules? What did it have to say about your findings?
Yes. Well, the CFIA says it can't comment on specific products or labels without doing an investigation first, like they did with Canada Dry. But they do say they're always interested in hearing from consumers. So if you do feel like there's something that is misleading or might not quite be right, you can file a complaint with the CFIA. And the information on how to do that is available on their website.
Any final advice for consumers who might have questions about a product or a label, Charlie?
Yes. So definitely don't judge these books by their covers. You're going to want to take a closer look at that ingredient list, and that will give you a better idea of what is inside, but also what might not be inside. And if you still have questions after doing that, you can take a closer look at that product, often near the ingredient list or on the back of the package. You will see a contact line. And that might be a phone number for the maker or the company of that product. Reach out to them, ask them your questions, and sometimes you might have to wait to get an answer, but those lines and information lines are typically quite responsive.
Okay, thanks so much for this, Charlie.
You're welcome.
Charlie Agro is a host with CBC Marketplace. And for the full investigation, watch Lousy Labels, What's in Our Food? That's tonight at 8 p.m. on CBC TV and CBC Gem. Meanwhile, coming up at 12 here on CBC Radio 1 in Manitoba is our call-in show Radio Noon. Host Lori Hoogstraten joins us now. What's coming up on today's show, Lori?
Well, it's Friday, so we're lightening it up a little bit. And so we're inviting collectibles expert Mike Hewen into the studio because we want to hear about musical mementos that you might be holding on to that might be worth something, might be rare. That T-shirt, that album cover, that ticket, stuff that you got at a concert or because you were a fan or it was the very first album. Sort of musical memorabilia. We want to talk about that. We mostly want to hear the stories, whether it doesn't really matter so much if it's valuable, or maybe it does because Gordon Lightfoot is auctioning off all his stuff. But we want to hear from people. 204-780-0893 about your musical memorabilia.
Yes, dig them up. Let us know what you've got. Thank you, Lori.
Thank
the
you.
news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's sunny. It's 1 degree. We're going to start climbing. That sun will warm us up to a high of 9 today. The wind is going to pick up just a little bit as well. Well, a man is in critical condition after a serious assault in front of a St. James hotel. And after investigating at the scene for 10 hours, Winnipeg police have now just reopened Ellis at Barrie. CBC reporter Megan Ketchison has been at that scene all morning and joins us live. Megan?
Yeah, Winnipeg police were focusing most of their attention for the time that I was here at the bus shelter in front of the airport motor inn. This is Ellis and Barrie, and as you say, moments ago, police took down the police tape, and now traffic is flowing through. Now, police were going over it quite thoroughly. What we do know is that about 10 o'clock last night, there was a serious assault in this area, and one man was taken to hospital in critical condition. We're waiting for an update on his condition now. Police, the forensics unit was here on the scene, and they were picking up shoes, and there was a jacket, a few bags, and so right now we have the fire crews that are on the scene washing down the area after the investigation, and a number of people were taken into custody for questioning, but we don't know if a suspect is one of the people that were being questioned. We are hoping to get more information later today. Reporting live, Megan Ketchison, CBC News.
Thanks so much, Megan. Winnipeg's mayor says this city needs more money from the province to staff its fire paramedic service. City staff forecast the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service will overspend its budget this year by $16.4 million. Overtime alone accounts for more than $7 million of that. Mayor Scott Gillingham says funding from the province hasn't kept up with the city's population growth or with spikes in homelessness and addictions.
Our firefighters and paramedics are running from call to call to call. In addition to that, we've got more firefighters right now that are accessing workers' compensation for various reasons. So, the chief just doesn't have the numbers available per shift as they used to.
Gillingham says the city is in talks with the province about finding extra funding for its emergency services. The newly elected chief of a remote First Nation in eastern Manitoba is being remembered for her leadership and her work with families. Chief Tanya Bittern died Saturday following a medical issue just 4 days after she was elected to become chief of Poplar River First Nation. Bittern previously served as a counselor there. She also worked as director of the Head Start program, which helps parents and their children. Vera Mitchell recently served as chief and became a mentor for Bittern.
She's very community-oriented and a very good people's person. Like, she had patience, and she was honest and always looked out for everybody, and especially because she had children. Her children were going to grow up like she did in this community.
A counselor in the community is now serving as acting chief at Poplar River until next steps are decided. Statistics Canada is out with the latest unemployment figures. Nationally, unemployment remained at 6.5% in October. Manitoba's jobless rate is edging higher. It rose from 5.7% in September to 5.9% last month. That said, only Quebec and BC have lower unemployment than Manitoba. Today is Indigenous Veterans Day. Every year in November, Saging Anishinaabe High School holds services and hangs banners to honor its community's veterans. Since the pandemic, the school has created a video as another way to mark the veterans' sacrifices. The video is posted online, showcasing Saging veterans' names, photos, and where they served. Gary Swampy, the school's principal, says sharing the video has had an unexpected outcome.
It started off with COVID. That's how it started with that video, but it grew, and now there's some that have been taken away when they're young in the 60 scope, and now they're coming forward after seeing this video. Even if they were taken away, they were born here, they were from here, it brings them home.
This year, more than 50 veterans featured in the school's Remembrance Tribute video, and the school is holding a celebration for Indigenous Veterans Day today. The NHL's youngest player, Vancouver-born Macklin Celebrini, scored last night on the league's oldest player, Marc-Andre Fleury. Fleury, of course, now playing for the Minnesota Wild. Minnesota did win that game 5-2, but Celebrini wasn't even born when Marc-Andre Fleury became an NHL player. It's amazing. What a sport. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Wow, that is a cool story. Thank you so much, Heather, and thanks for all your hard work this week.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you.
Heather Wells is at the CBC Manitoba News Desk. You are listening to Information Radio. Abby Adeyemi has one last look at the forecast.
From the north to the south, we're going to see clear skies. Sunny conditions will dominate the forecast, though some regions will see breezy conditions, and there's a possibility of a light snow in the north. We're going to see high temperatures ranging from -2 in Churchill to 12 in Dauphin and Brandon. Winnipeg gets to high of 9.
Enjoy that beautiful weekend, Abby. I see that blue sky through the window right now. And joining me now with maybe not such a beautiful view is Corey Funk looking at the traffic.
Yeah, heard from another Corey on the commuter line. Eastbound Portage at Ferry blocked right now. All 3 lanes on the right. It's just the far left lane that's open right now. There's emergency crews tending to what appears to be some sort of accident at eastbound Portage at Ferry. So just the far left lane, big backups as you can imagine, people squeeze through.
Thank you, Corey Funk,
Thank you.
our show director and associate producer here for our current affairs unit. Also, thanks to Abby Adeyemi, Kalkadan Mulugeta, Sierra Sanders, Chidi Ikuma, Jim Agapito, May McKillop, Bruce Layden, Marshall Hodgins, Angelina Peltier, Dylan Longhurst, and Carmen Ponto for all their work. Our community reporter, Shanley Vidal, our host, Nadia Kidwai, Faith Fundal, Marcy Marcusa, our producers in unit, Wendy Parker, and this week, Donna Carrero, our YouTube producer, Kevin Nipatebo, Nellie Gonzalez is the show's producer, and Leif Larson is the senior producer of audio here at CBC Manitoba. I'm Emily Brass. I had a great time this week with all of you. The Current is next.